Good evening. 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. O'Neill, do you have a motion regarding the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to remove from the consent.
You're good.
Okay. I'd like to remove from the consent agenda the report on E's 002 and the one on 060, the ethics report.
Is there a second?
A second.
Ms. Rabin seconds. All those in favor? 7-0. Do we need to vote on it again now that we've done that, or I think that's okay, right? We all know what we're doing. With that, Principal Riegling for the school welcome.
Good evening, Chairwoman Erickson, Dr. McCursey, members of the Board of Education, cabinet members, and guests, and welcome to Hamilton Avenue STEM School. This academic year marks the start of a new chapter in the history of Hamilton Avenue School. While celebrating our centennial year as a school, we also took our first steps on the journey to becoming a STEM magnet. In year one, our primary goal has been to establish a strong foundation of inquiry-based instruction. This required a shift in our thinking, teaching, and learning. With a high level of enthusiasm, over half of our certified teachers attended a week-long summer institute with our partners, the Connecticut Science Center. The warm week in July allowed us to immerse ourselves in the inquiry process as learners, and the takeaways were remarkable. With a clear target of implementing inquiry-based instruction, we adapted the Kath Murdoch cycle of inquiry. The cycle has enabled us to establish a common language about what this all means. With this shift, we have already noticed that our students are more engaged in their learning. We have also begun to see some positive outcomes with regards to student achievement. I'm very pleased to report that Hamilton Avenue students made significant growth between the September and January administrations of the STAR assessments in both reading and math. While we recognize that we have a very long way to go, we are excited by the preliminary results and look forward to continuing on the trajectory of gradually closing the existing achievement gap. I was very fortunate to be warmly welcomed by the board, the cabinet, fellow administrators, parents, and students of the Chickahominy community. The teachers of Ham Ave were well prepared for this transition and extremely motivated to succeed. It has been an honor to work with a talented team of professionals. The GPS curriculum has supported inquiry for many years, but now the Hamilton Avenue teachers are bringing that curriculum to life with new, highly engaging and relevant learning activities. With the support of Irene Parisi and Sheila Saval, we have been able to provide teachers with the resources necessary to begin to make this pedagogical shift. So what does it all look like, feel like, sound like? Well, in a nutshell, busy, exciting, and even a little bit noisy. Learning is interactive. Students are communicating and collaborating to solve real-world problems. Our classrooms are often buzzing with enthusiasm. Students are learning to identify investigable questions that guide them in their research as well as their data collection and analysis. They are beginning to talk and think like scientists. They're developing an understanding that the skills and concepts that they are learning are relevant across multiple content areas. But perhaps most importantly, Ham Ave students are happy. They are engaged, enthusiastic, and learning to take risks. Innovation comes from establishing a culture that supports healthy risk-taking. With a focus on inquiry, teachers and students alike are encouraged to ask those burning questions, try new ideas, and even make some mistakes, for it is often from our mistakes that we learn the most. As part of our partnership with Hamilton Avenue Families, we've held 3 very well-attended family curriculum nights this year: the inquiry process, literacy instruction, and most recently, we held an interactive STEM night during which our students and parents learned about the design and engineering process as a means of helping them solve real-world problems. These evenings allow us to share with parents some of our teaching strategies, as well as our ideas about how to support learning and encourage inquiry at home and in the community. Another goal for us this year is to assure a safe and welcoming climate by focusing on our district norms. This year we added 2 parents to our Safe School Climate Committee. The committee has worked to create a set of fun activities which explicitly teach our students what is expected from living the norms throughout their day and throughout the school environment. We are currently planning an afternoon in which our students in the building will travel through a series of stations to learn about our norms. For example, what does it mean to be safe on the bus or be here in the classroom? In our beautifully diverse community, we recognize that students come each day, often with different understandings about behavioral expectations. It is critical that we establish and honor common behavioral expectations for all Hamilton Ave, which we hope will extend well beyond the walls of our school. It is a privilege to be part of the Hamilton Avenue community and the exciting work that we have only just begun. The process of STEM implementation will take several years, but I can assure you that we are off to a fabulous start. I could share many stories about our personalized learning, our implementation of digital tools, our student council, our student-led assemblies, or our outstanding Suzuki program. But enthusiasm for our school community is best shared by students. Our STEM coach, Kathy Byrne, and our library and media specialist, Eric Lane, and some of our wonderful students have created a brief video to share our enthusiasm with you. I know that you will need to turn to see the video, but I hope you enjoy the video.
Welcome to Hamilton Avenue School, Greenwich's first STEM school. This year, our focus is on inquiry. Inquiry is based on the belief that students build understanding by working and talking together as they solve problems, ask questions, and investigate. When you come into our classrooms this year, you're going to see a new level of engagement and energy. You're going to see our students engaged in deep conversations. You're going to see them sorting through data, researching, and planning their next steps.
I think that there's a lot more math and science. Even in gym, we're doing math problems a little. And in science, we keep coming up with our own questions and doing experiments and stuff like that.
They're working on the answers to meaningful questions and applying what they've learned to real-life situations. As they work through the inquiry cycle, our students are making connections across content areas and building the skills that they're going to need for a lifetime.
Stuff like baking soda, then we got water to it, and we were recording it in our science notebooks.
And it's fun here because we get sometimes to use research groups and you teach other people about animals and share our ideas with other people.
For astronomy, we can use resources and make our own questions because of all the things that we can search on our iPad. We were doing a cycle with a battery wire in a light bulb to turn it on, and that was really fun. My class enjoyed it. Especially being in STEM school, is that not only we do a lot more science, but also even like the arts, like for music, we get to use science. So instead of just the teacher like telling us how this is made in like 1600s, we have to try to figure it out ourselves.
It's almost like a new beginning for Hamilton School. It's amazing.
Thank you for your time and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Principal Ringling, and the whole team that's making this such a success at Hamilton Ave. We're very proud of the progress that you've made. With that, I'd like Mr. Hull to meet us at the podium. We're going to start the student recognition portion of the event.
Members of the board, Dr. McCursey, GEA President Sutton, and members of the community. I have the tremendous pleasure of introducing GHS Junior Noreen Kurji. Noreen was my student in Honor Civics and is an ongoing member of AVID. Noreen won the Yukon Martin Luther King Jr. Essay Contest by exemplifying its theme, Dismantling Oppression, Finding Your Voice. This has been the crux of both Dr. McCursey's introduction of Representative Himes at GHS, referencing W.E.D. Du Bois and the Color Line, and in comments made by Diversity Week leaders Corey Myrtle and Ziana Almonacci. We need to diversify all tracks at GHS. We should not continue to have socioeconomic or color lines in our student center or lack of diversity in our advanced placement classes. From Noreen's award-winning essay. Living in Greenwich, Connecticut, an affluent and white neighborhood, it is difficult to prosper as a minority. To dismantle oppression in my community is to make the elementary schools more diverse. Adriana Espina, the lone Hispanic member of the Greenwich Board of Education, said, "You hear some of the kids being referred to as the ghetto kids, and that is horrendous." From personal experience, the statement made by Adriana Espina is completely true. To dismantle oppression, it is very important that students in Greenwich are exposed to people with different cultures and backgrounds at a young age, so that they are able to see past the color of one's skin. In 3 Ways of Meeting Oppression, Dr. King states, "To accept injustice or segregation passively is to say to the oppressor that his actions are morally right. If we let minorities in my community and elsewhere be put down, it will continue to happen because the oppressors will think that they are not doing anything wrong." Noreen, through the power of her words, helped us think deeply about race and class and makes us all proud of the tremendous accomplishment she has achieved. We're proud of you, Noreen. Thank you for dismantling oppression by finding your voice.
We're not sure where your certificate is, but we will find it for you. Thank you, Mr. Hall. And for those of you who don't know, Mr. Hall also is the teacher advisor for We the People, which has always been a great source of pride for Greenwich High. With that, I'd like to call up Ms. Bridget Berry to recognize the Scholastic Writing winners.
Thank you.
1 minute.
Oh.
We have to do this. A phenomenal essay deserves proper treatment.
Good evening, all. Congratulations to the recipients of the 2016 Scholastic Writing Awards for the Hudson to Housatonic Writing Region. We want to announce Greenwich High students who've received this recognition. It's judged by a panel of professional novelists, editors, teachers, poets, librarians, journalists, and other professionals selected these works from 1,880 total works this year. And they are the most exceptional in the region. For more than 90 years, the list of young writers recognized has included Sylvia Plath, Truman Capote, Bernard Malamud, Joyce Carol Oates, and Lena Dunham. Not bad company. Students, Greenwich English teachers congratulate you on this accomplishment. I do want to take notice of one teacher who's in the mix tonight and who's encouraged quite a few students this year to enter, Miss Laura Blumenthal. Thank you. And students, keep on rocking us with your writing. I will call your name. Please come to the front to be recognized and congratulated by the superintendent and the chairman of the board, and remain here until everyone's been called up. Audience, please hold your applause until everyone's been called up. Thank you. First person to be recognized, Alexander Bound, 9th grader. He's won a Silver Key for journalism, the controversy over the Falklands. Our second student, another 9th grader, Alex Hone, couldn't be here tonight. Won honorable mention for journalism on the spectrum of success. Third student, Alexandra Kosyakov, 9th grader, Silver Key for critical essay, Nuclear Power, the technological phantom that can save our future. And a Gold Key for the short story, Gone Fishing. What a contrast. Monique Nikoloff, 9th grader. Honorable mention for a personal essay / memoir, Confessions of a 13-year-old Girl. Alexa Stevens, 9th grade. Honorable mention for journalism, the piece Helping South Africa, the Aftermath of Apartheid. Alexandra Braverman, 10th grade, Silver Key for short story Persian Proverb, and honorable mention for poem For Hawaii. Shobita Sundaram, 10th grade, honorable mention, personal essay memoir, When Time Stopped. Olivia Luntz, 11th grade, Silver Key for poetry, Red, and honorable mention for personal essay memoir, The Monster. And finally, Madeline Zhao, 11th grade, Silver Key for her poem, Introductions. Congratulations, writers. We're really proud of you.
Lauren, do you want to come up in the picture, please? Please. All great writers have a mentor.
Many mentors, lots of great teachers.
Thank you, students and staff. We recognize that you have homework and other responsibilities, so you are welcome to leave the board meeting at this time. You're welcome to stay if you wish, but we thank you for coming out on a school night. We'll just wait a couple of moments to let the room clear, and then we'll call up Greenwich High School student government. Spencer Ferragasso, student body president.
Good evening, Superintendent McCursey, Chairwoman Erickson, members of the board, and guests. Thank you for coming and for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. Over the winter break, several improvements were made to the Wi-Fi infrastructural system in Greenwich High School, specifically in the Student Center. In the coming weeks, I'll be working closely with Mr. Dunn, his IT staff, and the student body to determine how the system has improved and where the system still needs work. Student government will be surveying the student body to determine their thoughts about the Wi-Fi system. We will share the results of this survey with Mr. Dunn and his IT staff to help him determine where the system still needs improvements and where the system is working great. It is important to remember that the system is still a work in progress. We've made steps to make the system that much better, and these continuous steps will make it what the system is today, one of the best public school Wi-Fi systems in the state. Student government anticipates this survey to be released in a few weeks, so students have ample time to react and to develop an opinion on the changes that were made. We look forward to continuing this well-made progress. Thank you.
Mr. Joseph Peters, Senior Class President.
Good evening, Dr. McCursey, Chairwoman Erickson, and members of the board. This week is Diversity Week at Greenwich High. Every day there are a variety of presentations available for teachers to take their classes to in order to learn about race-related issues, social activist movements, and different cultures. This week I was fortunate enough to attend 4 presentations and can vouch that the presentations have been tremendous. The presentations are extremely well done and highly engaging. Given by social activists and people of different cultures, the presentations are very popular and yield large audiences. The entire diversity awareness has been a successful way to spread open-mindedness throughout the GHS community. Recently at the high school, there was a significant commotion over the possibility of using only one gown color for this year's graduation. Personally, I understand the incentive for a change, but I thank Dr. Winters for valuing the input of our class and rethinking his initial decision, now making the color of one's graduation gown a choice for students. Since the beginning of the year, members of the senior class have been working hard to plan the traditional senior class SRO performance. Currently, we are in rehearsals and the show starts next week. I would like to invite the board, as well as all members of the community, to attend the performance March 3rd, 4th, or 5th as a way to help support our senior class. Thank you very much.
Ms. Carol Sutton, GEA President.
Good evening, Ms. Rigling, Chairwoman Erickson, and board members, Dr. McCursey, members of the cabinet, and members of the community. I am Carol Sutton, and I'm honored to represent nearly 900 members of the Greenwich Education Association. On behalf of the GEA, I would like to extend sincere congratulations to this year's honorees, all of them talented writers, and their teachers. I will use my time this evening to comment on 3 agenda items and 1 non-agenda item. First, it is appropriate that we're meeting here at Hamilton Avenue since an important agenda item relates to construction that will improve these already wonderful facilities. That the remediation of the parking garage is finally moving forward this summer is reason for celebration. Since I became president, in fact for almost 8 years, which is long before me, teachers have been alerting their association and the administration to problems with the garage. And the remedies, while well-meaning, have been short-term and inadequate. We're thankful that the litigation is over and the funds are now available to pay for a long-term solution. GEA supports using the balance of the funds, as proposed this evening, to bring the playing fields and surrounding areas up to Greenwich standards. We also trust that the administration will do whatever it takes to ensure that the projects are complete for the opening of school. Second, on the topic of professional ethics. During the February 4th work session, the topic of whether there should be a procedure through which to hold teachers accountable for ethical behavior was raised. One idea was to require students to complete an online module in order to certify their understanding of professional behavior standards. The association, while understanding the importance of such standards, is alarmed by this prospect. Why? Because there's no ambiguity among teachers when it comes to what is acceptable professional conduct. And in the rare case when there is a breach or a perceived breach, procedures already exist to address this on a case-by-case basis. Mr. Stacy's addendum clearly shows that standards of professional conduct are addressed at many junctures of a teacher's training and career. at the university level in teacher prep programs, at the state level for certification and recertification, at the local level annually when salary agreements are distributed, and on the micro level in every school building where the Code of Professional Responsibility is prominently displayed. In fact, there's a copy posted at the GEA office. Further, the TEPL process includes indicators that must be met each year. In particular, the teacher complies with the Code of Professional Responsibility for teachers, and the teacher is aware of and compliant with established school procedures, district policies, and state and federal guidelines related to the establishment of a safe and accessible learning environment. Time is the most valuable resource for our teachers, and it is limited. Please do not ask them to spend even 1 hour certifying that they understand the importance of ethical professional behavior. Believe me, they understand and they practice it every day. They are also held accountable by processes that already exist. On another agenda topic, the GEA is pleased that the revisions to GPS Policy E002 establishes teen dating violence as a priority area. Back in September, the Association of American Universities published a study on sexual assault and sexual misconduct on college campuses. The results indicated that between 20 and 25% of a sample that included 150,000 women reported being victimized at some point in their college careers. The AAU acknowledged that had the sample included men and LGBT students, the percentage would likely have been higher. GEA supports all efforts by the district that have been or will be made to prevent teen dating violence among our students and to intervene appropriately and respectfully when it is reported. Finally, GEA would like the board to know that teachers are grateful for the administration's effort to establish realistic guidelines around email. While 24/7 access to our principals, parents, and students is possible, teachers deserve to be off the clock for part of each day and part of their weekends. In fact, you'd be interested to know that the Greenwich email guidelines have become news beyond our corner of the state. Not only did the CEA pick up the story and post it on Facebook, so did media sources from the Hartford and New Haven areas, with comments ranging from "way to go Greenwich" to 9 p.m. cutoff is past a teacher's bedtime. Once again, Greenwich has demonstrated that it is out in front in the digital age. Our teachers appreciate being heard by Dr. McCursey and by Mr. Stacy. Thank you very much.
Mike Troney, PTA Council.
Good evening, board, Dr. McCursey, Dr. Flanagan. I unfortunately returned my courtesy car to the car dealer and left my speech and laptop at the car dealership, and it closes at 8, so I apologize for leaving early tonight. I've wrote a few notes here, I'll be short. I'm sorry about that. First of all, I wanted to thank Ms. Ringling for hosting us tonight with Kathy. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Denise, it's such a positive feeling here about the rollout of STEM at Hamilton Avenue. I think it's palpable. I think we all feel it. I want to congratulate Ms. Ringling on the rollout of this inquiry-based model of education. It's very promising, and I know it's not going to change things overnight, but I'm sure keep up the great work, and I look forward to seeing the progress over the next few years. So great. Congratulations, and we're looking forward to your progress here. Two sad notes. Dr. Flanagan, thank you very much. I read the news on Monday. You're retiring from deputy superintendent role. We will certainly greatly miss your experience and wisdom. Naturally, I think the deputy superintendent role is naturally a behind-the-scenes role, but I've seen firsthand how her expertise and her wisdom have been used to great effect to help the principals and to help us with our issues that come up. So I wish you much luck with future endeavors, and thank you for all of the years that you've given to the students and the teachers at Greenwich Public School. Another sad note, and then I'll get to some happy news, I promise. Ms. Patty Allen has resigned from Parkway. I think she was very successful in implementing an energetic, unique implementation of a green schools curriculum. We worked very hard as the PTA to help enable some of those ideas and dreams, and we certainly congratulate her on her future endeavors, and we will miss her. On the positive step, the New Lebanon school construction was finally approved by the Board of Selectmen. I want to thank the New Lebanon Building Committee and all the members for it. It's a very hard and arduous task, but it's very, very worth it. I think we have to look forward to a new school in a few years that will fill the educational specs as defined by you, the Board of Ed members. So I want to congratulate them on taking that next step, and we will all be watching it progress very carefully. And also, the Innovation Lab is continuing to recruit freshmen for next year, for the next sophomore class. I urge parents and students who are possibly interested to attend some sessions and to listen to the videotape, or assuming you were here tonight, to hear Dr. Winter's update on the Innovation Lab, which I will enthusiastically watch, probably in videotape, because the dealership closes at 8 o'clock. But anyway, I want to thank everybody, and I apologize for forgetting my backpack, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Does anyone have the sign-in from the... Thank you, Aaron. If anyone who remembers who was first on the sign-up, you're welcome to come forward. Is this Mr. Pecora? Good evening, sir.
Superintendent Dr. McCursey, Chair Laura Erickson, and members of the board. I was born in Barman, but lived in Chickahominy for the last 56 years. I was appointed Chickahominy Association Chairman and was on the Hamilton Avenue School Building Committee and a District 3 member, RTM member. We all knew after the school was built that the school field was not fit for our children to play on. At that time, I was told that we had to wait to fix the field until the lawsuit was finalized. I convinced the PTA and the community to wait. 8 years later, which is now, the lawsuit has been settled, and we have $670,000 from the lawsuit. It is estimated that it will take somewhere around $400,000 to fix the garage. We also found out that the Glenville School and the Hamilton Avenue School has $900,000 coming back from the state of Connecticut. Our reason for me being here is to ask you, as we have the Parks and Recreation Department, the Building Committee, whom have all agreed that this should be done, is to get the Board of Education aboard so we could go forward. Now we have two problems to solve. The deck of the parking garage, which is on its way. Number two, the playing field, which we need your agreement to get this accomplished. Before the school was built and the garage, we had a field that was level and we had a field that was 20 feet longer. Now we have a field that is 20 feet shorter and a hill from second baseline to the garage that has a 6-foot elevation, part of which was due to the 80 wells put near the garage in our field. Would you want your child playing on a hill where they play a game of soccer and the ball does not go where it's kicked but goes down the hill, or try to kick the ball uphill? Also, we feel it's not safe, and already a child was hurt while playing on the field. Also, the field in the past 8 years has not been used for ball games and the like by Parks and Rec. Really, all it's good for is for kids to run around.
30 seconds.
And not even safe. We will be having a lot of construction to fix the garage this summer, and we, the community, PTA, and the District 3 RTM members want the field to be corrected this summer so that we have a mess only one summer, not 2 or 3, to fix the field. We waited 8 years. That is long enough. Since we have all the money, which is about $400,000 to fix this problem, there is no reason to delay. Please help us get this accomplished by backing up our plea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pecora. And I forgot to remind the speakers that we do have a 3-minute limit. Fiola Kashi, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name properly, but from Innovation Lab.
Hi, my name is Fiola Gashi and I speak on behalf of Innovation Lab. Innovation Lab has impacted my life in such a great way. I'm so happy I made the choice to enroll in it. I've learned so much about myself that I never would have encountered if it wasn't for InLab. I've never been so engaged with my learning, and instead of doing assignments for a grade, I do it for myself. Actually learning the material has become a priority of mine. In the past 6 months or so of the school year, I've learned more than I've ever learned before. I've done interviews with veterans from World War II, state representatives, and made multiple documentaries and a portion of a textbook. These projects are things I would have never imagined I could accomplish. If I can summarize Innovation Lab with one word, it would be pride. These amazing projects will be something I will cherish for the rest of my life. Seeing my hard work not only go in a grade, but something I created is breathtaking, and I hope other classes will one day feel the pride I feel every day in school. Thank you.
Pierce Ornstein, to be followed by Sue Webb.
Hi, my name is Pierce Ornstein. I'm also a 10th grader in the Innovation Lab. First joining Innovation Lab for me was a last-minute decision. I attended the last information session put on by the teachers last year, and I went into it not really too excited about the idea, but I left completely convinced, and my first words to my parents afterwards were sign me up. So that's the kind of mindset I had going into the first day. I took a little flack from my friends, but I've really loved being in the program. I've always had a little bit of a problem with time management, but the biggest thing I've seen with Innovation Lab this year for me is the connection between the teachers and the students and the parents is really beneficial. I feel like in a traditional school system setting, it's much more difficult to build up this kind of relationship, but spending so much time with the teachers and they're all knowing each other and they know me really well, they've been really able to help me develop habits and thoughts and ideas on how to handle my time management, and I've already seen such huge improvement. I think they have as well, and I know my parents have, and I've really loved that. And like Fiola said, the projects that we've been doing are just amazing. And we had our exhibition at the Bruce Museum a few weeks ago, and a couple of my friends ended up coming, and they aren't even in Innovation Lab, and I've already had a few that are signing up, that are shadowing. I know a lot of freshmen are. They're excited to join, and I can't wait to be back next year to see what they have in store for us. So, thank you.
Sue Webb, to be followed by Rafa de la Ciela, if I'm saying that right.
Good evening. I'm Sue Webb, the proud mother of Sophia Dodero, a sophomore participating in the pilot of Innovation Lab. Sophia is thriving this year in every aspect, academically, socially, physically, and emotionally. At first, Sophia wasn't sure InLab was for her. She was doing very well academically, and the work was challenging. However, her biggest concern was that her closest friends, for varying reasons, were electing not to participate in InLab. Thank you. Sophia demonstrated her independence after much contemplation by deciding to take a leap of faith, and she's never looked back. In fact, she says that she couldn't imagine going back to a traditional classroom nor a more conventional way of learning now that she's been exposed to the InLab environment and structure for learning. She's visibly happier and she's less stressed out, which is good. She says she doesn't really feel stressed at all and certainly nowhere near the levels experienced in her freshman year. Furthermore, she's fully engaged and she's truly learning. The customized and deeper level of study that taps into a student's specific interests enhances the entire learning experience. A few months back, my husband and I were in the living room and Sophia rushed in, excited to share her school day with us. She said that she figured out a new way of explaining a mathematical solution, why a mathematical solution was so. Not the solution itself, but bringing her own lens to the problem and coming up with a unique way of looking at it that proved to be correct. And then, as an added level of accomplishment, she was able to successfully explain her methodology to her teacher, Mr. Wallach, and help other students understand the concept through her interpretation. My husband and I looked at one another with such a sense of pride in the acknowledgement of the profound impact InLab would have on Sophia's future success. We believe this outcome is due to InLab's focus on independent thinking, creative problem solving, and through inspiring curiosity, not in answers, but rather in understanding the learning behind the answers. And just as important to Sophia's academic success has been her growth socially and emotionally. The InLab community of students and faculty have fostered Sophia's desire to make new, very connected friendships while still maintaining her prior friendships. It's been a seamless transition from a social standpoint. Overall, Sophia feels incredibly supported. She's much more self-confident. She feels that her opinions and thoughts matter and that she's contributing every day in a meaningful way. All of this adds up to a very positive, rewarding, and remarkable outcome for Sophia and for our entire family. We are so grateful to the GHS administration, Greenwich Alliance, and InLab's outstanding faculty. Their foresight, their dedication, and commitment to the program and each participating student has been immeasurable. Long live InLab. Thank you.
Rafa, to be followed by PTA co-presidents Patty Jomo and Cricket Dement.
I'm scared what I might say might make me come across like Donald Trump. Because I'm going to insult half of you, and I'm going to sound very immature. But I must say that I believe that Sophie has the best teachers in Greenwich. I feel now I maybe insulted the teachers, well, because they probably see themselves not necessarily as teachers, because what they've done in creating this program, this curriculum, is to foster an environment where they can form relationships with their students. And I was looking at Google today to figure out what that was and how I could express that. And what that makes them is an educator. So there's a big difference between an educator and a teacher. Every educator is a teacher, but not every teacher is an educator. And I can say that Sophie is lucky to have these educators, because many times she'll come and she'll do something in school, an assignment, and she'll get it. She won't get it perfect, but when she goes to them, she'll be able to sit and talk to them, like Pierce said, have a relationship with them, and she'll have a chance to do it again. She'll have a chance to make it better. And she improves on it and makes it better until she learns it. An educator makes sure that they learn it. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful to Greenwich Alliance for funding this. I'm grateful to the board for showing support. I'm grateful to Dr. Winters for promoting it. But I'm most grateful to having not teachers, but educators educate Sophie. Thank you.
After the Greenwich High PTA will be Katie Yu.
Good evening, Board of Ed Chair Erickson, Superintendent McCursey, Board of Ed members, Cabinet members, and community members. I'm Cricket Diamond, and along with Patty Jomo, we are the GHS PTA co-presidents. We would like to touch on a topic that has come up a few times this evening. This week is Diversity Week at GHS. The theme is Everyone Belongs, and it is an event that we are particularly proud of, as it is a vibrant staff, student, and GHS PTA partnership. The week's activities expose GHS students to the world around them, both near and far. It includes a series of cultural activities that engage awareness of differences and empower students to be more accepting of individual differences. The variety of speakers, programs, and events allow teachers to bring discussion back to enrich the classroom with the flexibility of relating to social studies or English as easily as it may relate to the arts. The introductory speech was given by Greenwich resident Congressman Jim Himes. We are very pleased to have Dr. McCursey introduce Congressman Himes and to have some of our Board of Ed members in attendance as well. Highlights of the week were events that the GHS PTA proudly sponsored and include Amy Fagan's visual arts exhibition entitled Beyond Genocide, a performance by the New York Traditional Chinese Art Center troupe, Miles Jackson's presentation entitled Skateboarding is a Passport to a Global Culture. We culminate the week tomorrow with a performance by the Tassa Drummers during the lunch blocks in the Student Center, and an Alvin Alley dance group in the Performing Arts Center later in the afternoon. We are pleased that we have been able to work with staff and students to shape diversity messages as well as provide funding. GHS Diversity Week provides the opportunity for all of us to realize that everyone belongs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Temet and Ms. Jomo. I also want to recognize Mr. Garfield Charles, a member of the GHS faculty who has been instrumental in promoting Diversity Awareness Week at Greenwich. Following Katie will be Julie Ferniers.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight I'm speaking as a parent and not as the co-chair of the PTAC ALP committee. Thank you to Mrs. Connor for suggesting the addition of Mandarin Chinese in the World Language Report. However, can consideration also be given to offering this more broadly across all elementary schools? Mandarin is a language with many short words and 5 different tones. This makes it perfect for a younger student to learn naturally, but very difficult for an older student to be able to master. Repeated studies have shown that the ability to acquire a language, specifically the mind's ability to pick up different sounds, falls drastically starting at around 5th grade. I would also like to thank Ms. Staten for asking about whether coding could be considered as a world language at the high school at the last work session. While I know that Connecticut does not currently recognize coding as a language, there are a number of states that are in the process of recognizing it, including Maine, Florida, California, and Texas. This could be a great addition at the high school and could serve as a viable option for students who struggle with learning a spoken language. Many kids with learning disabilities, including 2E learners, really struggle with the auditory piece of learning a foreign language. With regard to the whole student proposal, while destructive bullying and/or drug-induced behavior cannot be tolerated, please be mindful that every kid is one of our kids and that all of them deserve our time and effort. Logs can be a helpful way to be mindful of issues, but at what point might this become an albatross to a student who may not possess the perspective or maturity yet to understand that their challenges and transgressions can be overcome and that they possess the ability to become successful, productive members of society? Please consider the ways that kids, especially special ed students, can be put under extreme stress, including the recent article in the Greenwich Sentinel about stress levels at the high school, the lack of supervision and prevalence of bad behavior on school buses, especially in cases where kids are on the bus for almost 45 minutes. In these cases, can bus monitors be considered? The mix of students at the high school and how this creates a melting pot from different socioeconomic, racial, learning, and family situations. At the work session, it was discussed that most incidents related to special ed happen at the high school. It would be interesting to explore the reasons behind this. Ms. Rabin mentioned the YWCA program. The YWCA board has already made inroads through the YNET at the high school. Perhaps they can be approached to offer an assistance program, including the middle schools, in conjunction with a campaign that encourages students to stick up for others and celebrate differences among our student community. Ms. O'Neill brought up disaffection from instruction. This should be explored, as well as how many of the repeat offenders fall into the ADHD or special needs category. I also think ability levels should be gauged for these students. For students who struggle with buy-in to district norms, please consider peer mentorship programs, as well as looking for avenues to engage different thinkers and bring them back to the community. Thank you for your time.
Julie Ferniers, to be followed by Catherine Pappas.
Good evening, Dr. McCursey, Chairwoman Erickson, Cabinet, and members of the Board of Education. My name is Julie Ferniers, and I am the Executive Director of the Greenwich Alliance for Education. I'm here tonight from the Greenwich Alliance to ask you to continue to support Innovation Lab at Greenwich High School. As you are aware, the Alliance has been a key partner with the district in funding a variety of programs designed to make education relevant for more students. Innovation Lab is one of those educational programs and is definitely providing that experience for the students enrolled. I know there was a conflict for many of you with the BET budget meetings on February 2nd, the night of the student exhibition of work at the Bruce Museum. The board members, administrators, parents, and curious community members who were able to attend the exhibition would agree with me when I say that the room was filled with poised and confident presenters who were very proud to be part of InLab. When asked questions, the students demonstrated effectively that they really understood all the components of their projects, from the personal narrative to the chemical reaction and all the equations in between. Through guidance from their teachers, they designed projects reflective of themselves, and each student dove deep into creating and building something from the bottom up. What they learned will be retained, which is often not the case after taking a test, as an interesting fact that was cited in the movie Most Likely to Succeed. The commitment by the teachers to this program and to their students is something to be celebrated. I've had the true pleasure of watching from the beginning these gifted educators design, execute, and continually refine InLab to make it a challenging, engaging, and successful place to learn at Greenwich High School. It is important to also note that Innovation Lab is embracing digital learning in both humanities and STEM classes and in the design studio where students can work independently or cooperatively in groups to further explore their work. Next week on March 1st, the Reaching Out Grants applications are due back to the Alliance, back to me at the Alliance. Before completing the application, I make myself available to teachers, administrators, staff, and community members to hear their idea to see if it fits into what we tend to fund. We have a grants committee that reviews each application, so I'm not part of the final decision, but can provide some guidance to applicants in the process. This year, I've had a number of conversations about innovation from all levels within our schools. Innovation is an exciting theme and is being embraced by our talented educators. Greenwich High School is a place where our town's children come together to grow academically and to become global citizens. Innovation Lab is another place at the high school to make those things possible for our students. Go visit. You will be very impressed. Thank you.
Kathleen Pappas, to be followed by Mike Warner.
Hi, I speak on behalf of Innovation Lab. Since entering Innovation Lab, my mindset has undergone a significant paradigm shift. When I heard about the program last year, I was interested but still had concerns about coming in during the pilot year. I remember I had put off the thought of doing Innovation Lab and assumed I would take the traditional route. A pivotal moment for me was when I saw Carol Dweck's Growth Mindset TED Talk. Dweck's TED Talk opened my eyes and made me realize that the growth mindset is in fact a good thing, and Innovation Lab is built on that same philosophy. Right before signing up for Innovation Lab, I heard many untrue things about the program before it even started. An example of this happened one day during a freshman learning center. A fellow classmate asked if I was going to sign up for AP English and AP US History. I replied saying I was going to do Innovation Lab. The student then said, "Don't do Innovation Lab. It's supposed to be for the kids who don't do well in regular school." I had to laugh at this moment, realizing that this classmate had the fixed mindset that Dweck had mentioned in her TED Talk. The program hadn't even started, and this student had automatically assumed that Innovation Lab was an alternative for struggling kids. By doing Innovation Lab, I have realized that there is more than one way to learn, and that is perfectly okay. In fact, after my classes in Innovation Lab, my head hurts because of all the thinking, planning, and work that goes into the projects that we complete. Creating an innovative environment has helped me develop a growth mindset and discard the fixed mindset that I previously had. As far as paradigm shifts go, changing my mindset about learning has been a huge alteration in how I think about education. When thinking about the word school, I no longer associate the word with stress, anxiety, and endless piles of worksheets and homework. Before Innovation Lab, I once viewed subjects such as science to be a bit boring and stress-inducing. Now during STEM class, students are investigating parallel and series circuits and their different functions. Later on, we will complete a group project. This project will require us to prototype and build a circuit to power something that does a specific task. Innovation Lab has allowed me to not only work in real-life settings and teams of people, but also has allowed me to advocate and think for myself. Thank you.
Mike Warner?
Good evening, all. My name is Mike Warner. I'm the chairman of the town's finance committee, and I don't want to make a comment on the programmatics tonight. Clearly, they're well advanced. I would like to make a comment on the physical plant. As you know, the town invested millions of dollars and resulted in such a fine physical plant that we have here, and it's a wonderful school. What I would comment on is the previously mentioned turf, the lawn, the fields here that do need some investment, and I would encourage you to not stint on that investment. Only a small thing sometimes can color how people think about a facility. And while a field, it may not require a large investment, it's an investment that can have an effect on the way people perceive Hamilton Avenue. Only a bad accident or a rumor or the wrong comment can affect the way people think about this school. And after such huge investment and well done investment, I would encourage you not to hold back on taking care of this problem. It's an important problem, and it could be well outsized to the size of the investment it requires. I would make one other comment on programmatics. I had heard one of the lab students say they were having a problem with time management. That's a good sign, and it'll only get worse. Thank you very much.
That is all the speakers that have signed up this evening. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item? Please come forward and just state your name, sir.
Good evening. I'm sorry I got here a little bit late. I'm Dave DeAndrea. Dr. McCarthy, how are you? My friends on the board. I want to speak about the field situation. I no need of being repetitious. Mr. Pecora stated it and Mike restated it, but I'm going to come from two standpoints. I was born 50 feet across the street, still living on Hamilton Avenue. I played on that field day and night for years and years and years. That's that part of it. From the professional standpoint, if you don't know me, I'm the retired director of golf for the town of Greenwich. So my expertise is I was a member of the golf course superintendents of America for 15 years, so I know a little bit about turf. And from the very get-go, this was not done properly from the base to the drainage to the elevations. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is safety. It's an absolute nightmare. So we're sitting with something that is not good for the students, it's not good for the community, and liability-wise is an absolute nightmare for the town of Greenwich. So I think it's very imperative that you take this very seriously and act on it and do it once. I also, in the past, was the chairman of the Board of Parks and Recreation for 20 years. I inherited the famous Band-Aid approach at the Hamel Rink. So let's do it once and finish. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearing. We'll move to reports. Dr. McCarthy for the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. As is the norm with the monthly report, the things I share now I'll put in writing to the board in the follow-up super notes. But first off, Cindy Wriggling rightly so left because Principal's Days start very early. But we've had great leaders here. We have a phenomenal leader here in Cindy Wriggling, and I would urge you to visit the school and see what's going on. The videotape that we saw earlier, we should put all over the world because the spirit that's in that videotape, and a year ago where we sat about this month proposing the STEM initiative, and the board did that, a 5-year plan, And then with the transition out of Cynthia Womack, we needed a dynamic leader, and we got Cindy Wriggling to town. Many may know she's a proven successful magnet school creator and leader who decided to join us from elsewhere in the state. Soon the board will hear from the formal Innovation Lab presentation, but you don't have to be too smart to see a deep connection already between what Hamilton Avenue is doing and what we're learning about from Innovation Lab. Too often schools and districts have said that you never change. You keep doing the same thing. Well, what we've heard and seen in Hamilton Avenue and what the Innovation Lab testimonials and witness bearing has done already is say, this is a district that knows what to keep going, that's working right, but also where does it say we need to do some things very, very differently. And a lot of people are part of that. But I'm very much looking forward to the in-lab presentation. It's an excellent report, but it connects deeply to what we're already seeing here at Ham Ave. Ellen Flanagan, we will celebrate you a great deal. You're not retiring. I want to change that misunderstood verb out there. You've got some great plan that you're going to let us know about soon. But we'll celebrate you a great deal because those ideas of innovation, I don't see you as backroom, I see you as out front. And so many in the district and the town see it that way. And so we will celebrate you a great deal, Ellen, but anything good that's going on in this district, you have your thumbprints, fingerprints all over. I take credit for those things that aren't going so well. But we will honor you greatly, Ellen. Next thing I do want on the Diversity Week, I was fortunate to be able to be at the session with Congressman Hines and a spectacular student panel. Corey Myrtle actually did introduce the congressman. And as I said to the 400 students gathered there, get to know her now, because later when you say, my goodness, who is this young woman? We went to school with her, you can actually see I knew her. Because an incredible leader, and I thank the PTA and everyone else for the leadership on that. And yes, thank you, Gary, for your work on that, Mr. Charles, because it really has been a special week. Weather happened this week. I'm looking for the Hamilton Ave students and the in-lab students to help me understand weather. Monday, I was the last in line of 15 superintendents to call for to get out of school early because of some storm that was coming. You all know what actually didn't happen. And then last night we were hit with ferocious thunderstorms. So we have a changing world, a changing climate, and I look for our students to help us understand it so superintendents can make consistent decisions. And yes, parents, we did hear from you today, so I take note of all the comments. I take them very seriously. We also want to talk about summer school. With thunderstorms, we might want to think about the summer. Ellen Flanagan has been leading that summer school to great heights, and we have a new way to market it. Ellen's put together a program working with the Bruce Museum, the Greenwich Garden Center, and the Greenwich Audubon for an event this spring, date to be determined, I don't have that in front of me, to help promote and market what's going on in the summer school. And again, that's a great coming together of the resources of Greenwich, not just our schools, but the agencies in town that make us such a strong community, and to help people see that learning goes on year-round in the Greenwich Public Schools. Next update, I'll be brief because this will be substantially in my written report to you that will come this weekend, but each month now we provide a fairly detailed update from the curriculum standpoint. Irene Parisi puts that together. Let me just hit a few points. The strategic plan work is underway, as the board knows. We're working closely with you from a cabinet standpoint. Communication materials will be flowing soon on that. Brand new set of communication materials are being finalized so that we can do much better than we've done as an administration in helping everyone in the town know about that. I had an email out to all staff this week to help assure them that the strategic plan is one that will build on existing work, and where it is new work, we'll take time to help people adjust to that. The comprehensive assessment process is underway. The STAR assessment is brand new to us. We are getting a lot of very, very good feedback from teachers, particularly at the K through 8 level, on the value of the STAR assessment. We just finished the second round of that. I try not to be a parent in my work as superintendent, but I am. And I can tell you as a parent of a second grader, that assessment result has already helped us as parents understand our fine daughter. So it is a very good addition to have. We want the high school to get just as active with the STAR because it is a very important way to help understand progress in the midst of the year. Very important announcement you may have seen from the state today regarding standardized assessments. One thing you've heard me advocate on strongly is to get the optimal level of assessments. Most districts in this nation, and I would put Greenwich there, have too much assessment going on. The simple math is the more you assess, the less instructional time you get. We know that great learning happens on instructional time. So today, the state of Connecticut, with one of its two major required assessments, the SBA ELA, backed out on requiring, or actually instituting the performance aspect of that. That's the essay part. Let me stress, as we saw earlier, writing matters greatly in Greenwich. We're great at teaching writing. We're working hard even better at teaching writing. But that performance aspect of the assessment was requiring a lot of additional assessment time in the sense of the state was that the value add on understanding student progress for that was minimal. So they are immediately saying that performance task will not be part of the assessment. Our staff are enthusiastic about that because of, again, that simple equation. We get back more instructional time and simply put more time for us to work directly with students on writing and other basic skills. And we care about writing. We care about performance. I mean, that's what InLab's all about. That's what you saw in the videotape for Ham Ave. So we're not backing off on performance. We're just pleased we don't have to be spending, thanks to the state, extra time assessing it. Professional learning is underway in a variety of ways, both for digital learning, but reaching beyond that in the idea of personalized learning. March 4 is an early release day. We've been planning actively for that, working carefully with principals to make professional learning even that much more relevant. We had fallen off a little bit on the relevancy score. I heard that clearly. So we've gotten back to that, and the core still is digital learning. Last thing I'd say, those of you who track state policy know that we have a change in graduation requirements per state requirement coming at us. So we have people working on that. We'll be working carefully with the board on that. With the community, we've already signaled that. Dr. Winters is working actively on that with Irene Parisi. But that curriculum aspect of the report will be more fully laid out in writing to the board. So there's a full report, some light and enjoyable stuff and some heavy stuff. But we're doing good things in Greenwich, and we're going to only have sunshine the rest of this year.
Next, I'll go to board reports. Mr. Bernstein?
So I'd like to report on the progress of the New Lebanon Building Committee. The committee meets about once a week. We met yesterday. I'm happy to report that we have a construction manager on board. I believe the ink is drying now, thanks to the very slow approval process of the town. It took us that long to get here. The construction manager is really important to the process because they help evaluate the design from multiple factors, whether it's buildability, meaning can we actually build the building we've designed, to cost estimation, which was very eye-opening yesterday. They took the budget that we had, broke down the design schematics into a budget, and the committee considered that yesterday, and with a vote actually proposed the budget, which was wrongly reported in the paper today. I can't believe everything you read in the paper. Sorry, Paul. But it goes on to the BET Budget Committee tomorrow, and we're very hopeful that conversation will continue. One of the things that happens throughout this process is design gets refined over time, and we have cost valuation. So they are always looking for ways to improve the design and decrease the cost. Just looking at the numbers that were proposed yesterday, you can see a very high contingency number, which probably will be unnecessary because in this instance, the construction manager is on board early and helping us narrow the scope of the project, which is amazingly helpful. Also, thanks to the selectmen for finally approving a design, allows us to move forward with the planning and zoning process. So that process is moving forward, and we're hoping to get on the agenda for an upcoming meeting with the schematic design. So all is moving forward.
Mr. Sher?
So if $41 million is the wrong number, what is the right number?
So the number that was reported was actually a amalgamation of several numbers. What's built into the number, thanks to the way the reporters took their information, includes portable classrooms, so the modulars, includes revisions to the playing field, also includes a building that was not the original number that was proposed, the sort of back of the envelope calculation based on a quick look at the ed specs, was a different size building. Basically, it didn't include the walls. When you go to the state for your approval and your reimbursement, the state actually calculates everything from the walls inside. They don't actually count the walls. This actually includes walls. You kind of need them for a school.
So So what's the number?
So the number for the building is $37,550,390.
So the building went up from 34 to 37, and you're saying the difference between the 37 and I don't know what, and a half or whatever, and 41 is modulars and field remediation, did you say?
Well, you've got to back up. So the difference between the building cost is actually based on the fact that we now have an actual design. Before, what we had was a back of the napkin drawing. We never had a design.
Whatever the reason.
So we can now actually price out, and which is what the construction manager has done, which is fabulous. We've not had this in other previous building projects in town. We actually have a real number now, a real number to work from, real designs to work from. So that's why we've got a number. But added to that, yes, is the cost of modulars and also the cost of the field. You have to remember, if you look at it as an entire number, that becomes the reimbursable number for the state. You don't want to look at the pieces separately.
I guess I'm trying to connect from what we had before and what we had now. Doesn't matter to me whether it was accurate or not. What I'm trying to say is before we were talking about, because it's in our documents, there were budgets done in feasibility studies by credible architects that said it's going to cost you $34 million to build the building that we wanted with our ed spec. What I hear you saying now is as the building committee has refined it, whatever they did, hired somebody, whatever, that new revised estimate for that is now 37 and something. And then the discrepancy between that number and the 41 that's reported in the paper is they've included these other costs that we knew we might incur, like $2 million for portable classrooms for a year or two. And I guess some part of this is now to remediate the arsenic and other things.
No, that's actually separate.
Okay, I'm sorry, I heard you say the field.
No, the field is to fix issues with the field. So the field alignment is actually wrong. If you're in the batter's box right now, you're facing into the sun.
Okay.
Also to fix the field, same issue that we've got outside here today.
So it doesn't include remediation, that's a separate cost
No, that's a town cost.
someone else is worrying
Yeah,
about.
that's the town. But it also does include a contingency that's much higher than we originally planned for. When the architects did it, they did it about 3%. When you do a building, when you do home construction, you're actually looking at the difference between what it's going to cost and what you think it will cost in the future.
Yeah, in Greenwich, we always do 10%, if I'm not wrong. In most of our budget.
We have an escalation contingency, then there's an owner's contingency and a design contingency. I would just add that having been at the meeting yesterday and knowing that Mr. Walco is facing the BET Budget Committee tomorrow, the $37.5 million is a budget for a schematic design. The building committee recognizes there's much work to be done. We don't have enough time to get into all the details, but the materials choice. There's a lot of things that can be discussed that could potentially bring the cost down. But this was the construction manager and the architect.
I love the idea that we don't have a good history with that, but let's see how it turns out. 37 is the number, the comparable number, not 41. That's a helpful clarification. And let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I think it was very positive that the construction manager and the architect, they got together and they put together a very detailed budget and a very quick turnaround time to meet our budget guidelines. But, there's definitely more work to be done. Ms. Dayton?
I'd like to report as the liaison to the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. I also sit on that board as an area director, which means that I am a conduit of information for more than 10 towns in southwest Connecticut, all of which have boards of education. I hosted a legislative breakfast on the 1st of February. We had board members and legislative reps from Trumbull, Norwalk, Wilton, Westport, Fairfield. It was a very good discussion about what we want to get accomplished in the General Assembly. We have a set of legislative priorities. I won't go into them in detail, but they are to fund existing initiatives, address the achievement gap, and maximize resources, which focus the State Department of Education resources on support to local districts rather than enforcement of instructional mandates. And that is something we all agree on. I encourage all board members to come up with me to the Capitol. We are going to lobby on March 2nd Starts at 8:30 at the Bushnell in Hartford. And I really look forward to sharing with them our thoughts on what will help our district move forward. It's going to be a tight budget, but there's still much we can accomplish together. So I encourage you to join me if you're able to.
Ms. Applebaum?
Hi. I actually have two reports in two different areas. The first is in my role as liaison to the student government at Greenwich High School. I just wanted to report on their positive work on identifying methods to expand student voices and provide more opportunities for students who might not be involved in student government and some of the more traditional ways of communicating to be able to express their opinions. And they have created an email, concerns at ghsconcerns@gmail.com, and it enables students to note their concerns in a positive way and have them be addressed by the administration. So kudos to them for these efforts. Second, I'd like to comment on the positive work that's being done in the Strategy 2 area of the strategic plan. And this is specifically in the family and community engagement area. I'm sure people will be very happy to hear this news, but we are going to have a redesigned website. We have actually, the Greenwich Public Schools website redesign project team has submitted its first major set of deliverables and is on schedule to launch a new district website in late spring, followed by 15 school websites in mid-August this year. The new websites are designed to be responsive in format to any device, desktop or laptop computer, smartphone, or tablet. And in response to feedback from the Greenwich community, the content will be more consistent among and between the school and district sites and will be streamlined for ease of navigation. I can tell you a lot of effort and time was placed in looking at the mobile versions of all of the options that we had before us, because we know that's how most people are looking at the website now. The website vendor, which is called Final Site, has received the sitemaps, which is like our table of contents, the design, theme selection, colors, fonts, logos, etc. And they are now actually beginning to build the websites. And while they do that, the team is readying the content, and they're readying content for migration. The team is actually updating the web use and publishing procedures, so there will be clear information available to all webmasters on what and how to proceed. And they're going to put together content strategy workshops and training sessions for the new system. So I'd like to say kudos to Kim Eves for leading this effort. It is something that has been long needed, and we all look forward to the end result.
Ms. O'Neill?
I'd like to report on the Policy Governance Committee, which consists of myself and Dr. Francis and Mrs. Applebaum. We've been reviewing our policies. It's an ongoing process to make sure that we're in compliance with state and federal guidelines and statutes, and also to make sure that we have policies that are continued to guide our district to higher levels of achievement. And one of the things that we've undertaken this year is to ask CABE, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, to review and do an audit of our policies for them then to indicate where we might be missing policies or whatever. And this will help us to make greater progress in reviewing our own policies and procedures. So I just want it to be noted that that has gone to CABE, and they will take approximately 3 months to do that. I want to also indicate that Dr. McCursey is the district representative on PGC, and so we have very healthy discussions, and we look forward to seeing what CABE has to say about our policies.
Dr. Francis?
A couple quick things as liaison to the Alliance. First, I'm just so excited to see so many in-lab kids here and families. Just to celebrate our successes, I think, both with Most Likely to Succeed. I think it was a great showing and discussion. Bruce Museum in-lab was a fantastic night, and saw a lot of board members both of those nights, so that was great. Upcoming dates, March 1st is when the Reaching Out grant applications are due, so calling all teachers and innovators and people thinking about what would be great things to do in the district. March 10th is a 24-hour Giving Day challenge. The Alliance is on that list, so if you would like to support the Alliance, it's a great way to do that. And May 7th, Save the Date Trivia Challenge as part of the Alliance fundraiser and fun event.
Ms. Raymond?
I probably should let you know. I'll be quick. I'm the liaison to the Distinguished Teachers Award Committee. Maybe we should say Distinguished Educators Award Committee. And the deadline for submissions, this has been a while, but the deadline is March 3rd. So any parents or students that think about nominating a teacher and filling out the packet, you don't have that much time, but maybe you can get it done by next Friday.
I just have a few highlights to report in the chair report. The Board of Ed members and cabinet appeared before the BET Budget Committee for a full day of budget hearings on February 3rd. I wanted to commend everybody for their presentations. I think it was well received by the BET Budget Committee. We were the first to go. I had the pleasure of attending the mid-year graduation at the Greenwich Alternative High School. Dr. McCursey was there, Dr. Winters was there, Ro Ampha, the administrator of the Alternative High School, led a wonderful ceremony. It's a small group, but it's a very poignant ceremony. Later that afternoon, there was a mid-year celebration at Greenwich High School in the Media Center. Again, a small group, but a very meaningful ceremony, so I was happy to be able to attend that. Ms. Applebaum was also able to be there. The board held 3 orientations this month, or in the end of January and February, with the new board members and cabinet. So I now can officially declare that the new board members are oriented. And I wanted to thank the cabinet members. The role is to spend some time with the new board members, and others are welcome to come, and some did, so I appreciate that. And about 45 minutes to an hour was spent going over roles and responsibilities and answering questions, so I think that's very helpful. That was followed by a Freedom of Information Act session that was hosted by Planning and Zoning Commission of the town. Several board members were able to attend. Dr. McCursey was there, Mr. Rickey was there, and some of our cabinet administrative assistants, Ms. Valentine, Ms. Spooner, and Jerry Thompson, who's Bob Stacy's assistant. So I think that showed a level of commitment to complying with the Freedom of Information Act. We do strive to be as transparent as we can. I also participated in a realtor meeting with Dr. McCursey and Kim Eves that was held at Eastern Middle School on the 19th. That was very well received. About 35, 36 realtors were there. Mr. Mayo led a tour afterwards, and there was lots of positive feedback after that. Pretty light correspondence this month, but I wanted to note that I got 5 letters in support of the German program at Greenwich High School, and Mrs. Connor was very helpful in reassuring parents that we remain committed to the German program. I also want to acknowledge Ms. Young, a Mandarin Chinese teacher at Greenwich High School. It's a very popular program. And finally, I just wanted to note that the Strategic Plan Leadership Committee is moving forward. We did have a meeting this month. It's been very productive with board members and cabinet members working together to achieve the goals of the strategic plan and move it forward. And that's all I have. And with that, we will move to the agenda. I'm going to call forward Dr. Winters and Dr. Golden. And I'm assuming you're going to recognize the members of the team in the audience. And are you sure you didn't assign the kids to come and speak tonight as part of their...
Good evening, Chairman Erickson and Dr. McCursey and board. Last year when we came to the board, we were explaining and defending a concept, an abstraction. And when we tried to sell this concept and abstraction to students, we had nothing to show them. We just had an idea. We had a convincing argument. And it's with overwhelming joy that we come here tonight with something real, something tangible. We touched at the Bruce Museum. We heard from the actual participants here today. It's an extremely humbling experience. And I think it makes the program all the stronger in our ability to come here tonight and share an update, this progress update with you, that much stronger. I can assure you that this was not an organized campaign to come and promote Innovation Lab to the Board of Education. I think what you saw tonight was an outpouring of pride. It was not not founded on the idea that something was going away or that something was in danger or that somebody needed convincing. But when the idea was placed that wouldn't it be nice to have a couple of students and a couple of parents speak of innovation lab, you saw this groundswell of please let me do it, please let me stay up late and not get my homework done so I can watch board proceedings. I'm really touched by it, and I think I would imagine you all are too. So the Greenwich High School Innovation Lab is fully supported by our administration. Dr. McCursey has been a part of the conversations from the very beginning. Jason Goldstein is an administrator who helps with all the logistics of the program. It's based in his house, Cantor House at the high school. And I am trying very hard not to get the reputation for being a stalker. I'm down there more often than probably anybody would like me to be, but I have to admit it's very hard not to spend most of each day down at Innovation Lab asking kids what they're doing, why it's important, and how would they know they're doing a good job. This program was designed with a powerful change model in mind. We took a vision, a concept, and we knew that what we wanted to do was to find a team and empower that team. Empower them with resources. And you heard from Julie Freniars tonight, the Greenwich Alliance were our saviors. They came and they helped us and they made it possible that this team not only had the time to explore this, but they had the materials and expertise and coaching and all sorts of ways that we could flesh out this program. We also took on from the beginning a very collaborative leadership model. We said we wanted a team, the people who were actually going to be implementing the program, to be designing it, to be fleshing it out, to be monitored and supported, but to have the power to make the decisions on a day in, day out basis. And that's what we're seeing. We're able to watch what's going on, see what's going on, listen to the students, listen to the teachers, address problems, but you have a team of people who are coming together, who are in the actual activity of building this program, of implementing this program. They're making hundreds of small decisions each day about how to make it work. If we were trying to micromanage that, we would be dead in the water. It's a great example of empower the people who are doing the frontline work and you will get great results. And I think that's what we've seen so far. We also have a team that, as you can see, all of them showed up tonight, which was a surprise to me. I knew Sarah was coming to speak. I didn't know the rest of the team was here, so we would like to acknowledge them if that's okay with my part. So I'd like to actually name them and ask them to stand up, but to my left is Dr. Sarah Golden, who is involved in Innovation Lab, plus a whole bunch of other things at Greenwich High School. Very much appreciated. Brian Wallach is our math teacher. Courtney Hawes teaches English. Michael Belanger is our social studies teacher. I would like to acknowledge Gary Clark, who has filled in for Christina Shaw. Christina surprised us all with her maternity leave, and maybe even herself, I don't know. But she is coming back Monday. We can't wait to have her back. But Gary has been just a great resource for us along the way. With that, I'm going to turn the details of well, I would like to say one last thing about how this report was written. We tried to be very true to our word. And so we went back and we took the latest proposal that we made to the Board of Education last year. And we read it word for word and said, everything we promised, we're going to report how we've done. So it's a progress update. The report reads best if it's read online because the report reads best if it's printed in color. And barring no expense, we have provided that for you. I didn't even realize that. And the black font is the existing language with a couple of minor tweaks here and there. The red font is the new language. It's meant to show you, I kind of feel like we're saying, promises fulfilled. We said we would measure it this way. This is our progress so far. Finally, the action that we asked the board to take tonight is to extend the pilot for one more year until we have a fuller picture of all the data and the way that we can see the success of this program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Golden, who will walk you through some of the highlights.
Good evening. I'd like to first thank the board and Dr. McCursey for inviting us here tonight to share our joy with you for everything that we've accomplished. And I think it's actually, as Dr. McCursey alluded, really fitting that this is happening in Hamilton Avenue School, because they're embarking on something new and trying to make a go of it, and we're embarking on something new, and even though the ages of the students are very different, the guiding philosophy is very similar, and so that's very gratifying. As Dr. Winters said, we gave you a really long report with a lot of words in it, so you don't need me to say everything over again. Myself and the other members of the team are, of course, happy to answer any questions you have at any point, and I would obviously like to take this time to extend an open invitation to all of you to come down and visit us at your leisure at any time you would like to speak with us or speak with our students and see what we do and how we do it. We'd love to have you come see us. So what I will do, though, is take some time to give you a few key highlights of the things that in a lot of ways we're most proud of, and to share a few anecdotes that sort of don't necessarily show up in sort of the dry data. One of the things that we're most proud of is that the student body of Innovation Lab is reflective of the GHS student body as a whole in terms of student demographics across measures of male and female, special education 504 students, free and reduced lunch students, minority students. All of our percentages are roughly in alignment with the GHS sophomore class as a whole. Similarly, our course level enrollments are reflective of the GHS sophomore class as a whole for honors versus non-honors across all 4 core academic areas. So it was our goal to create something that was a school within a school and still maintain the character of Greenwich High School, and we're happy to report that that is the case. Secondly, as evinced in part by all of the faces who came here tonight to show their support, we conducted our own attitudinal surveys of both students and parents, and the results of those surveys indicate an extremely high level of satisfaction with the program, its approach to learning, and its educational outcomes by both the students and the parents. So we were very gratified for that. Along those lines, I would like to thank very much all of the parents and the students who came here tonight to show their support, and particularly thank Sue and Rafa for their time, and of course, most importantly, thank our student speakers who were willing to come up. So Fiola, Pierce, and Catherine, thank you so much for offering your time. I read a U.S. News and World Report survey once about what people fear, and public speaking scored higher than death. So thank you for conquering that fear and being willing to come speak tonight. Also, as evidenced by the people here tonight, together the students and the faculty of Innovation Lab have really created a vibrant and supportive community, and the positive dynamics of that community are immediately apparent when you walk in. The personalization and the differentiation of the learning is keenly felt, and as the students get to pursue their unique projects in which they can leverage their own interests and their strengths with the constant support of their peers. As you may be aware, Innovation Lab is completely heterogeneously grouped. We have, Mr. Wallach, 5 math classes and 2 different levels of science going on in the STEM classroom at once. And you wouldn't know it based on the students. They help one another, they mingle, they mix, they support one another, and each of them is challenged to their level. And frequently, actually, my observation as a teacher is that actually pushes the students to do more than they might otherwise do. We have students in a math class now who, for their math project, were doing trigonometric functions, which is not a requirement of the course they're actually taking. But they're exposed to it, they're inspired by it, and they pursue it. So that's been really gratifying. We would also like to point out that we have really realized our aim of engaging students in challenging content through meaningful project-based work. Students investigate problems and issues that have meaning, that they have impact to our community. And I'm sorry I can't solve the thunderstorm problem for you tomorrow, Dr. McCursey, but Catherine's group, for example, created a recreation of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and they analyzed how that impacted water quality, and in particular water temperature, just as an example of a project that we had done at school. The students have really been able to bring their personal interests to bear in their work. For example, one of our students, Yari, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, for his modernism project, and he rediscovered his love of drumming through a conversation with Mr. Belanger, which I think was great. They realized they had that in common, and they started talking about it, and then they had this modernism project, and Mr. Belanger said, how about music? And Yari said, okay, so he went and researched the bebop jazz movement and the key figures in the bebop jazz movement, studied what their approach to music was, taught himself a completely new grip on the drumsticks to match the style of the grip, and composed his own modernist drum solo in the style of the bebop jazz era. So that's just an example of how being in Innovation Lab help a student really redevelop a passion and apply it to school. Our students have interviewed and contacted a wide variety of outside professionals in the course of their work. A few of the most interesting ones, Dr. Roy Glauber, who's a Nobel Prize winning physicist and the last surviving member of the Manhattan Project, agreed to do an hour-long Skype interview with one of our students for his project. And my favorite part of this is they got on the Skype interview, and I guess Dr. Glauber's video part wasn't working, and here's a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and he says, Dylan, I can't see you. And Dylan says, okay, it's the little thing up on the right, and click that. And he's like, oh, there you are. So it was perfect. Our student taught a Nobel Prize winner how to use his computer. Fiola interviewed Connecticut State Representative Caroline Simmons, and I believe was extended an invitation to join her at the next session, which was impressive. Other student interviewees were Jack Bryant, who's the president of the Stanford NAACP, and also some Greenwich residents who have some amazing histories. Miss Gloria Heath was a member of the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, and their students interviewed her in part for their National History Day project assignment, which is due tomorrow. Right, guys? Okay. I'd also like to tell a particular story, and we have 43 students, so I could tell you 43 stories, but I'm going to pick one which I thought was particularly illustrative and meets my love of chemistry, and it just so happens that Emily is here right now to hear me talk about her. So our goal is to have students pick something that they want to do that relates to them, make a project, learn about it in a deep and meaningful way, and then present it out in the real world. So Emily is, as all of her friends know, really into social media and how it impacts social interaction. So when we got to doing our STEM self-portrait for our identity project, she wanted to reflect this about herself. So she decided in her Desmos graphing thing to make the images of a bunch of emojis, and then for her chemistry part of this, she made this piece, which if you went to the Bruce, you may have seen, where she got thermochromic paint, which changes color when you shine a light on it, and it becomes clear. So she had glass that she painted different emojis on, and she turned the lights on and off to try to give the appearance of the emojis being sent from one piece of glass to the other, the way it would be in a phone. And so she had to get thermochromic pigment to make this work. And she approached me, and we agreed that the chemistry demonstration she was going to be doing was explaining the structure of this thermochromic pigment and all the bonds involved and so forth and so on. But she had ordered this paint on Amazon from a company called Carlson Robotics, and the packaging didn't give all the chemistry information because that's not what most people want from it. So she looked up the email address of the director of marketing and emailed him and said, I'm a student at Greenwich High School, I'm using this paint for a chemistry project, and I need this following information, could you please provide it for me? So he emailed her back and gave her some information, and she read what he wrote, then she read what was on their website, and she said, thank you so much, she wrote him back, thank you so much for being so helpful, but I'm a little confused because what you said seems slightly inconsistent with what's on your website, so I was hoping you could clarify. Turns out he went out and paid a chemist who didn't work for them to answer Emily's question. And he came back to her and he said, you're right, our website is incorrect. And because of her project, Carlson Robotics changed the technical information about their product on their website. And in the course of, So the good news is Emily finally did get all the information she needed about the specific chemical compound that was present in the work, and Dr. Winters always laughs when I do this because he's like, stop with the gobbledygook. But basically she wrote an entire chemical analysis explaining how this apparently thermochromic pigment is actually a halochromic pigment because the reason it changes color when it gets exposed to heat is because the polymer melts and then the salt comes off and the pH changes and then a lactone ring becomes protonated and opens, and that's why it changes color. So we were very gratified that not only... What? I got it right? Thank you. So, as I said, there are 42 other stories I could tell you about students really engaging with their learning to create something meaningful with them, and then really trying to have it be meaningful in the outside world. But that was one that I particularly enjoyed. And of course, as many people mentioned and hopefully got to see, for us, the real moment, right? We had midterms. We had midterms. Our students took midterm exams, and then our exhibition was scheduled for a week after that, which in retrospect was maybe not the wisest timing. But that's what we did, and it was really, for me as a teacher, wonderful to see that, yes, they had stress about their midterms, and they prepared for the midterms, but the rubber hit the road, and people really got serious about the assessment of being at the Bruce, and that exhibition, and the number of students who the level of pride that they expressed in how they were able to communicate their work to the public at the Bruce, and the hundreds of people that came to see what they had done and how proud they were of their work. And some students, quite frankly, who maybe hadn't experienced as much success to that point in the year came back the next day and said, now I know what I need to do. And I've really got to get it together. So thank you so much for all of your support, for allowing us to come here tonight and share with you. Again, please feel free to come and visit us whenever you want. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. The Bruce was just the beginning. I must say a deep thank you to the PTA and to the Greenwich Alliance, who provided both moral and logistical and financial support for the work that we do. And again, thanks to the administration and the board for supporting us. And of course, again, thank you to our students and parents who support us every day and who are here tonight. Thank you.
Are there any questions from board members? Mr. Bernstein?
Process-wise, Laura, are we voting on this? How is this working?
No, I believe this is, within our policy, this is a notification of an extension of a pilot. I believe that is within our policy guidelines, but at some point, if this comes back as a new course, the board would vote on it at that point. But this is just a written notification of an extension of a one-year pilot to a two-year pilot. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, I'm sorry, say that again, Laura?
This is a written notification of an extension of a one-year pilot to be a two-year pilot. There's no action by the board required at this point in time.
Okay, now you got me confused. I didn't think that was an issue. I thought we have to approve pilots. I thought we already approved this thing. Okay, I thought we approved
We
this
do
thing
not
already.
have to approve pilots. Per our policy, the administration provides notification to the board of pilots. We approve pilots to the extent they require resources, but we do not have to approve pilots.
We've always, okay. We can have that conversation separately.
Mr. Bernstein, did you have any other questions?
I wanted to ask, by the way, sir, it's nice to see you.
All right, hang on.
again.
Mr. Scher, and then Ms. Staten.
Okay. Glad you're back. Thank you. Appreciate your enthusiasm. It's always good every time you come in. I wanted to ask a question about I have a series of questions, so Laura, you just tell me when anybody else wants to jump in.
I'm going to let you ask two, and then I'm going to recognize Ms. Staten. And
Great.
Come back to you.
Okay, so the first one was the profile of students. And thank you for providing that. One thing that jumped in, can you talk about the profile of the students? I went back to what you guys said when you were here originally pitching this idea. I went back and watched the whole tape of all those meetings so that I could get it verbatim. But also, I noticed in the profile, we are getting a lower percentage of minority, free and reduced lunch, SPED 504s, and meanwhile, the honors, non-honors is pretty similar to the rest of the schools. So, can you guys talk about that and what you're doing about that?
So our sample size, obviously with 43 students as compared to 615, as soon as you go up by one student or down a student, the percentages are going to oscillate more than they would for a greater number.
Yeah.
Our free and reduced lunch numbers are 14% as compared to 13.8 with the school as a whole, which we're interpreting as being the same. Our 504 is 4.7% versus 4.6% as the school as a whole, which we're interpreting as being the same. The male and female are within 1.5 percentage points. The special education numbers, that could be one more student. We've consistently communicated to parents and to the resource room staff that we welcome special education students and that we'd like to have a collaborative relationship with them and working with those students. We've communicated that to parents, and we have several students now, obviously, who are part of the special education program who are demonstrating that relationship can work well, that we do have a good partnership with resource room teachers and the other social support staff like the school psychologists and the social workers to help support those students. For the honors, non-honors, my take on, for the mathematics, it's basically the same. For English, 0.7% difference, again, that's probably pretty much the same. I would think probably the difference for science is based on the fact that for the honors chemistry, there is a somewhat strict math requirement that's put into place for being able to enroll in honors chemistry, and we opted, because I had the students in the class for a couple of weeks before they had to make that choice, for students who wanted to pursue that option, give them the option to forego the math requirement if they were otherwise meeting the requirements. So that may be why that number looks slightly elevated as compared to the school as a whole.
Here's what I would have expected to see, based upon what you guys said when you were here initially in, wow, it's almost 2 years ago. I know that I was an enthusiastic supporter of this as a pilot in the beginning, and I know Ms. Ospina was a really enthusiastic as person. And part of the board discussion was, I agree that your original proposal was school within a school. But when the board discussed it with you guys, there was a lot of discussion about what problem are we trying to solve, who isn't served, and who is this targeting. So we were trying to figure out, we want to invest in innovation to fix a challenge of kids who may not be engaged or kids who are not succeeding in the traditional model, I think was the actual terminology. And there was a lot of discussion about who are those students. And some of them were just kids who, Chris made a comment about the kid who passes the SAT at 800 in a subject but isn't really engaged, and it's reflected in there. So that's one kid. That's the engagement problem. The other part that you guys talked about was, you said minority ESL SPED specifically. I think there was someone else who was with you when you guys talked about that. And I was very interested in having this program. I think part of the purpose was, and what the board was approached on was, this will help us lift up kids who do not succeed necessarily as well as they might in the traditional environment. And I've just looked at the demographics, and it looks like we've only got that choice part done, which is we have a choice for kids, but we haven't leveraged the program yet for those kids who are not succeeding per se in the traditional. So I'm trying to understand that by looking at the numbers. I mean, it's great you've got kids, that we've got choice for parents. That's great. I'm interested in understanding what we're going to do about the other part.
As a team, our philosophy was always about, and I think we had even said, the quote we sort of came up with, is it something that could be for anyone, but might not be for everyone. And when we were attempting to provide to the board an idea of like a specific student that might be, very well those examples could have been those students, that there may have been students who, for whatever reason, did not feel a sense of engagement and therefore weren't successful for whatever reason. Our intent as a program, however, was always to make it something that would be an option for all students. And there are students at all levels of previous success or previous course enrollment who wanted to change their approach to learning, which is what we had intended to offer, and offer project-based learning. Also, here, I'll take off my Innovation Lab hat on, put my AVID hat. I mean, the achievement gap measure for Greenwich High School is really more AVID than it would be Innovation Lab. And we do have some students who are AVID students who are in Innovation Lab. It was not really ever the intent of Innovation Lab to be an achievement gap closing measure, but to be representative of Greenwich High School as a whole and offer a different way of approaching education that we anticipated would have greater engagement outcomes and could likely be beneficial to those specific students who hadn't already found success elsewhere in the Greenwich model.
Let me move on to question 2.
Sure.
Can you help me understand alignment to the Greenwich curriculum? In the original proposal, it was, we will teach the Greenwich curriculum, and I'm not a curriculum master, but I perceive curriculum to be a set of standards, a set of subject areas, so on and so forth. And I know in the original proposal it said we will teach the Greenwich curriculum. And I'm just trying to bridge between, it's fantastic that we have kids who are taking a particular thing and going deep, but I presume that comes at some level of cost to breadth. So, but maybe it doesn't. Can you help me understand that? How is it we teach the whole Greenwich curriculum to every kid who's in Innovation Lab?
So I'm going to try. The answer to that question is slightly different depending upon which subject area you're talking about. So I'm going to do my best to try to answer them across the different ones. So Brian, if I'm speaking improperly for you, let me know. So for example, for the case of math, what Mr. Wallach did, what he did is he took all of the curricular documents for the various math courses, and he took a look at them, and he looked at what they had in common and where there was potential overlap, and places where a curricular item was being addressed in multiple courses. Therefore, that was something that he had leeway to downsize a little bit in his course, because the student in the course of completing Algebra 1 to Algebra 2 to Pre-Calc would still be meeting all of the sum total curricular requirements of the math. So that was one approach that he took with the math to ensuring that that would happen. For the case of the environmental chemistry, as you all know, in between when we presented to you before and now, the next generation science standards have been adopted by the state of Connecticut and will become the new lay of the land. So the environmental chemistry pilot course was actually, in part by the greater science department, supported as a way to think about transitioning to those standards. So that course is not 100% in alignment with any of the curricula that currently exist, because we're trying to use it as a way to shift towards the next generation science standards. So I address many of the key concepts that are part of the greater Greenwich chemistry curriculum. We do a lot of the labs that are the ones like the flame test lab and things like that, which are considered to be key benchmark labs. We do the same science department benchmarks for the curriculum and then for the purposes of English, for example, the teachers have a lot more latitude about what the books they can choose are. So it may be that our students are reading a different book than a student at that level may be reading outside of greater GHS, but they're doing that within the context of the expectations of that course for the department. And the time period in history being covered in the American history class is spanning the same periods in history. It may be that certain time periods or certain events are slightly more emphasized in one place than the other, but in terms of the span of history being covered and the expected learning of the students and the demonstration of that learning, that's completely in alignment. And we're also in alignment with and meeting all of the departmental expectations for midterm and final exams.
Ms. Dayton?
At the end of the pilot, we're going to come to a decision-making moment, and I wanted to communicate my expectation in advance. I'd really like to have the STAR assessment data in making that important outcome decision. I know it's not available yet for sophomores in Innovation Lab. When does that data become available for sophomores?
I am the worst person to ask that question, because science is the only department that is not doing STAR, so...
This year we've done one assessment of for the ninth graders. The second assessment is March 2nd, which is the same day the juniors take the SAT. Next year we'll expand, and sophomores and freshmen will take STAR assessments, so therefore we'll start to have a regular source of those data. We do have the benchmark data, though, that is program aligned, as Dr. Golden was saying.
So we're going to have the STAR assessment data in advance of whenever you come back again at the end of the pilot and ask us to make a decision about the future. You're going to have full STAR assessment data to report to us.
I would think we will have at least two administrations of it. I would certainly hope that the STAR assessment data is considered as one measurement point, along with the kind of learning demonstrated at the Bruce Museum may or may not show up in the growth of the STAR assessment, but we hope it does.
Ms. Rabin?
All right, we'll do it again. So you did talk about a lot of the positive aspects of the program, and I did come to visit the day before. I think you guys had your exhibit, and I have the chemical on my shoe. It's nice and shiny. If you could just tell us about something that maybe was an aha for you on the negative side. So something that maybe occurred that you would do differently next time. And then also if you can answer, there was a number of kids that dropped out. Was there any kind of root cause for why kids started the program and then didn't continue with it?
I'll answer the second one first because it's easier. We had a couple students dropped out because they changed schools. So that's the easy one. We had a couple students drop out because they showed up on the first day and realized their friends weren't in the program and they wanted to leave. We actually also had a couple students drop out because they said to us in almost these words, "Oh, I thought I wasn't going to have to do any work in Innovation Lab. I don't," and then they and against our urgings, made the choice to switch out. And actually, ironically, we heard a week later from through the grapevine that one of those students said, "Oh, well, I should have just stayed where I was." So we did have a few. I would say if there's one overarching theme, and the students might be able to speak to this, honestly, I think it's social pressure for some students. A feeling like the people that are their crowd weren't there, and they weren't sure who their crowd was going to be. And so some of those students opted to leave.
I want to take a shot at your first question. We did not expect to get this right, or excuse me, we did not expect to get this perfect in year 1, and I don't think we'll have this perfect in year 10. It was always meant to be a growing, evolving, changing program where we constantly sit back. Today, for example, Brian and Dana Tulata and I had a long conversation about math because we are consistently going to look at what's happening, look at the results, measure the growth, look for ways that we can improve it. It's built as a laboratory. It's built to say, we don't ever think we're going to have it perfect. We're going to continuously strive for improvement. I think that's really important. And I'm not trying to dodge the question by saying, what did we do wrong? But to say, that's a really healthy way to look at how do we educate kids, is to keep putting forth an educational experience that we think is beneficial, helping the students reach it, watching what happens, and then based on the learning that we see that they demonstrate, making adjustments so that we can do it even better.
If I may answer that question too, the first one, because we have to, at least where I sit and others have to look at this from a district-wide perspective. Chris, Dr. Winters looks at it certainly from a high school-wide perspective. I think a challenge which we did overcome, but it's still an issue, is we were, through the great generosity of the Greenwich Alliance, in ways free up the time of teachers to be creative and innovative. That's well understood out there. If you want to get change and innovation, you got to free up some time to get there. We are right now looking at that example where within existing resources for some other challenge areas, we can do that. I'm going to bring more of that to the board, but some people have come to me from within the district, very early thinking to say, here's how InLab had time freed up. They've been able to get a start. We see a problem here. Could we do something similar on that? And I'm going to make sure the board's in early on the early thinking, so it's not a surprise later. But I think one of the challenges early was, hey, these wonderful teachers, they got this extra time. Well, of course they're able to do that. What about us? And so that's something that Carol Sutton and I have talked a lot about all the time. And I think we've gotten to a place where it's much more accepted. I sit every month with a group of teachers who I've told you before, bring me the truth. I don't lack for truth in this district. And early on with that group was kind of like, oh, okay, they're over there doing that. Now it's much more of an embrace to say we're learning from that. But that was an early challenge, if I'm being clear. And how do you take this specialized approach, have it be accepted, and then have us learn from it and sort of take that model elsewhere, model of change, not the particular model, if I can be clear.
If I can, I'd also like to just tell a brief anecdote to answer that question, which was the first marking period project was our air, soil, and water project, and Brian and I had this project map laid out of the order we thought things were going to go and how we were going to deliver the content that we thought the students were going to need, and we had done the intro to the project, and then we had all this whole plan about what the next thing we were going to do was. And we got into class that day, and the questions the students were asking were not that. They were asking different questions related to it. And so we changed everything on the fly and said, this week, that's what we're going to do, because that's what, and it was stuff we were going to get to anyway. We just thought it was going to come 2 weeks later. So that, I think, is the challenge and the beauty of what we're able to do, because we've tried to create a system where that can happen. And what ended up happening was that we had to make a mad scramble for 12 hours to make sure that we had the resources in place to support them in that moving forward. So if anything, I would say that's really the challenge of it, is making those constant micro adjustments. But I feel on the whole, we've been successful in being responsive to the students and also being honest with them. We're like, well, that didn't work, did it? which is what we're asking them to do, is say to us, well, that didn't work, did it? And make those kind of adjustments. So really for us, I would say it's a stamina question in this first year more than anything else, of making sure that we have those resources in place. And we had, the first day that we did that, some of the students said, I don't know where you want me to go to do this. And a little bit of that was culture shock for the students of, yes, no, I'm not going to hand it to you. You know, you have to learn. But that was a problem I want the students to have. That wouldn't be a problem I would want to take away from them, because I think that robs them of the experience. So they might have looked a little bit like this, but I think ultimately if you ask them, they'll say that was actually in their best interest.
Ms. Applebaum?
So my question is actually going to turn the tides on you all, because as part of in lab is to be inquisitive, ask questions, and innovation by nature is evolving. So as we think forward along the lines of what Ms. Dayton said and some others in how we will evaluate, is this program successful? Should it long-term be continued? What questions will you be asking? What data will you be collecting? How are you going to decide for yourselves, this is working, this is why, and this is what our recommendation is?
Well, no, I would, based on what we've already started with, I think for us, it's, were you at exhibition? Did you have something to present? How would you reflect upon your performance at exhibition? I would say a lot of it is the combination of the reflection and the digital portfolio, which is what the student blogs are. They're expected to blog almost every week unless there's, like on Thanksgiving or whatever. And those blogs always have a reflective component. What are you working on now? What problems are you having? Where have you made progress? What does it mean to you? And so evaluation of those blogs and the showing of the growth of the students over time is going to be a big part of it. For me personally, I think those are the most valuable metrics. And quite frankly, the survey data of the students and the parents reflecting on their own learning. Those survey also included student self-reflection on 21st century skills, completely in alignment with the vision of the graduate, asking them, how have you improved in your public speaking skills this year? 3 more people just upped that score, right? Or how have you improved in your time management this year? And now Pierce would add himself to that list. So those are the metrics that for us, I think are most important about the philosophy of Innovation Lab.
Mr. Bernstein?
Well, I'll address that more from the building perspective, which is, we need more students. We were hopeful for more than 43. We're grateful for 43. It is going to be probably a challenge until, I would say, these guys go off to college, that we are going to reach the sort of numbers that we anticipate. And it's also very helpful to have these students and these parents, because they are our ambassadors now, going out to classes and sharing this. So one of the metrics that we'll look at will be the enrollment numbers. And back to Mr. Scher's question, we want to maintain a pretty diverse environment as well. Certainly college acceptances is going to be a big measure for us. That's going to be something that I think is the major stumbling block for a lot of people to say, I want to be in that program. I think they like a lot of things about it. They're nervous about that component. When we do a great job and this group of students 2 years from now are getting into the colleges that they want to, very similar to what we saw with the AVID program, that's going to spread significantly. Mm-hmm. We are certainly going to be looking at standardized measures and performance on midterms and finals, at least the components of them that are parallel to the midterm and final in the regular classes. We've always said we want to teach the Greenwich Public Schools curriculum in a different way, but we want to be able to assess our students' learning. And we want to do that in a way that we are not reverting back to what I would describe as some of the tried and true traditional practices. We want them going deep, and we have a very clear philosophy that by going deep into certain projects and not being told what they need to know, but discovering what they need to know, they will develop a better understanding of that content as a whole. It's a slightly different approach, and we're watching it play out, and I think it's going to continue to. So those are at least 3 of the metrics that we're going to be watching.
Mr. Bernstein?
So I'll preface this by saying I brought my kids to the Bruce Museum. They were fascinated by the exhibition, so that was great. and obviously hearing from the students tonight, but I'm very curious about the staffing model. One, I'm concerned about the impact it has on the rest of the school. If you add a large class next year, what does that do to the teachers? Do you need to bring in more? How will that affect the remaining sophomore class?
Yeah, I actually am glad you asked that question because it reminds me of one more metric that I want to look at, and I'll get your answer. But the acceptance of teachers who are not in Innovation Lab but are part of Greenwich High School is an enormous metric for me to look at. We always built this with a laboratory notion in mind, which was to say, if we want to push the way we do education at Greenwich High School, let's start with a program. Well, Avid is a great example. Avid is a pocket within the school that created tremendous success, and with very little effort, we had teachers pouring in to see what was going on with those students and ideas filtering back out into classrooms. So you see many, many practices that started from that program in Greater Greenwich High School, and it's improving the education for all. That was the idea with Innovation Lab, was to say, let's create a place where there is something very different going on. I'm not going to say better, and I'm not going to say worse. I'm going to say different. And it gives Greenwich High School teachers an opportunity to walk down the hall and engage in something that they may not be able to see on a regular basis. Some of the best professional learning, if you don't get to see it and touch it and feel it and talk to the people involved, it's hard to translate into changes of practice. So that's a big component for me. Staffing is going to depend on how many students we generate this year. If we generate another 43 students, we will end up with somewhat similar staffing to what we have. We've always said that this is going to be staffed at the same ratio as Greenwich High School as a whole. We staff on a 15.6 students to teacher ratio. Our average class size is about 20 to 21, with obviously some variation due to scheduling. We're trying to stick to that. I think everybody accepts also that the program is new, it's growing, the numbers are small for now. There aren't 250 students yet, which is the cap that we will never go over. So there's not the efficiency of scale yet, but we're going to get there, and we're not going to do it by exploiting our teachers. We've also said we're going to abide by the teacher contracts. We're going to have the same workday, the same preps. I know they laugh at that because I don't think they have very many preps, but we're trying to stay within that range.
Ms. O'Neill?
Mr. Bernstein asked my question about staff ratio because there is some thought that maybe some of the other classes are larger because of the impact of the staffing. So whatever data you can bring us back on that, that would be helpful. The other question is, in terms of staff training as you grow, where do the funds, will Alliance continue to fund the training of new staff members, or is that something that is built into our budget or it needs to be built into the budget?
So the Greenwich Alliance very, very generously, as we all know, funded half-time research and development for the team of 5 for the first year. They funded the half-time research and development for our physics teacher, quarter of the physics teacher, because next year's juniors will be taking physics, and that's a new prep. We don't envision going back to the Greenwich Alliance for additional staff funding next year. For the ongoing professional learning, we would fund the Innovation Lab similarly to we fund teachers at Greenwich High School. So for their whatever travel there might be or whatever in-house professional learning, we will fund through our budgets.
Mr. Scher?
This was actually, Innovation Lab was remarkably helpful for me because it juxtaposed, you guys came in, and by the way, I would give you just one friendly piece of advice. We need to be really careful when we're talking about Innovation Lab. It is in the lexicon. You guys might not even realize it. We're always, and it's in the writing, this is juxtaposed against the other way we teach kids. And you may not even be aware of it, but it for someone who's standing away from it. It makes it sound like the other method is bad, old. It uses words like traditional, factory. We have to be careful with the language, because I don't mind that we have options for kids, but I don't think it's a good idea that we pose one way of educating kids versus the other. That's just an aside. But this was really helpful for me, because a lot of what you're doing in Innovation Lab, I thought we were doing in our regular education program. So it brought into stark relief for me that if we've got something that's so different, there's a set of practices that I had thought because I've been on the board now 6 years, we've been talking honestly about scrubbing those out of the system. As an example, we've talked about transdisciplinary a lot, and making units that in the complete educational program throughout the branch. We've talked about personalized learning. We've talked about scrubbing out homework assignments that are rote and routine. And I think some student tonight talked about the differences that they were experiencing before and what they're experiencing now. And I went back and looked at what was in your course summary when you guys came and pitched the program. You might not remember, there were 7 items, but there were 3 that jumped out for me. Personalized, strong connections, leveraging technology. And I guess maybe this is more of a question for you, Bill. Innovation Lab, when we were originally talking about this 2 years ago, we had talked about these as concepts, but now as a board, we've doubled down on this. I mean, DLE, $13 million, it's out there, technology is everywhere. It's not an anomaly anymore. Now we're talking about, from a strategy perspective, we're doubling down on personalized learning in a really, really big way. And the whole idea of strong connections, God, every educator who's ever come that I've been on the board has talked about that. So my real question is when, I don't know that we would necessarily, I would advocate taking Innovation Lab and making that the singular program, but when do all these other things get driven in a more meaningful, with greater fidelity, into the rest of Greenwich High School in this case, or particularly into the rest? Because we should get to a place where there will still be differentiation between Innovation Lab and the rest of the program. But to Chris's point, the best practices are actually instantiated. When and how does that really happen?
Well, I mean, I think quite directly we may have stumbled into a moment of brilliance. Because the fact of the matter is, if you look at organizational change, and I know you very well, Peter, particularly in education anyway, saying broad scale, let's make this change, there isn't much success at that. You need to get a beachhead, you need to have a place within a district, within a school that's making those changes, that right there within that entity, we then have to free up time. I think that gets the question, free up time for other teachers to go and see, aha, in Greenwich, we may have talked about personalized learning for a while, but here's actually how it's playing out. We may have talked about this interdisciplinary learning, and yes, it is going on elsewhere, but here it's playing out. We have a definite pedagogy in Greenwich. I've been here long enough to see it. Beginning in kindergarten, you begin group work, and you begin working that all the way up through, and it's distinct. You don't see this necessarily in other places you go. So by the time you hit the high school, you see very compelling group work. Separate from this, we've had a great win with CS50 at Harvard, where Matt Myers has broken through there. And when you watch that online, one of the things they celebrate is look at those Harvard students, and now Yale's joined on. Look at those Harvard and Yale students working in groups. They don't know how to work in groups. I've said, if you come out of Greenwich High School, 80% of it, you know how to work in groups because it started in kindergarten. So that's things going on elsewhere, but you can sort of deepen that understanding by going into the Innovation Lab. So I think the stumble into a moment of brilliance is, if we care district-wide about the kinds of things Innovation Lab's standing for, and we've talked a lot about it, now we have made progress otherwise, but here's a way to actually go into the high school in a location with honest-to-goodness Greenwich teachers, a very representative mix of students, and say, here's how it's actually playing out. And we have to, I think, as an administration, and it goes back to my earlier point, how do we structure time to help other teachers see that as we're making curriculum revisions? How do we structure time to draw on that? So that's what we have to do. But I think it'd be keeping in lab going, so it really is that engine for us, a place to go look to and understand. But I think the onus is back to the board to press us, okay, where are you freeing up time? How are you helping other teachers understand it while it continues to go along? That's what I would respond.
And I agree with that. Let me just end it on this. I guess just to be more clear, Innovation Lab is an extreme, instantiation of a particular set of philosophies, and that's great. And there's no doubt there's some parents who their kids are thriving in it and they want to support it. And we've always had choice in the district at the elementary level, so on and so forth. So I don't want to talk about taking this and replacing it with something else. I guess I'm trying to get at how do we take these practices that it's brought into relief that maybe we're not doing them as well in the regular program, and I'd love us to get more focused on that. I'm not suggesting let's change Greenwich High School into Innovation Lab, but a couple of those core things that we've been talking about, because this has been juxtaposed this way of Innovation Lab has it, the ... is the rest of the program doesn't. And I think we need to put, because that's covering the other 90% of our kids, I think we got to get underneath that in a big way. I know we're doing it already, but maybe we need to this helps us bring some more attention to it, and we should do it with a sense of urgency. One man's opinion.
Any other questions? And I would just add, thank you for the progress update. I would just add, through Dr. McCursey, if you could share with us the enrollment data closer to the end of the school year, that would be helpful. Oh, Dr. Francis?
Keep going.
I wasn't actually going to really ask a question, but just in case anybody didn't realize that I don't have a lot of questions because my son's in the program, and I just really want to say thank you to all of the teachers and to the administrators and the board for supporting it, because I do think it's a fantastic experience for him. Thank you.
And now we can let the in-lab students go home and complete their history assignment. Thank you for coming out tonight. Next on the agenda is policy governance, revision of E002. Ms. O'Neill?
Right, this is the second reading of the policy, and thus far I have received no comments, edits, suggestions, or whatever. So we will just move it on to the next agenda. Thank you.
Could I just add just a comment? I believe because of the way the state requires us to approve this, we need to approve procedures for this particular case. Is that correct? They're connected? So just for the next time when we vote on it, whenever that is, can we just be sure that the cover sheet adequately reflects what we're actually voting on, just so? That'd be great. Yeah.
Barbara, maybe you can clarify. The Connecticut Code of Conduct, I'm using the long-term. Okay, but that's not embedded in this item, right?
No.
No, it's separate. So this is ethics.
This is safe school climate and whole student development.
I'm sorry. Never mind. Scratch that. I'll pay attention.
We're not there yet. Yes, Ms. Dayton.
Ms. Ford, since the superintendent isn't here, I'm going to address you directly. I know it's a state requirement to have, and I know we have, so don't worry. You must have a safe school climate plan for each of the schools. When I went on the websites of individual schools, it may be a navigation issue. I was unable to find the actual plan. Can you help us discover where they are housed?
Each school does not have to have its own plan. You need to have a district plan. Each school does need to have a safe school climate committee.
So where is the district plan then?
The district plan is E002. The safe school climate policy and procedure is the plan.
Procedures are the plan.
Mm-hmm. That's why this one is unique in that you're approving both the policy and the procedure, because the procedure is the plan required by the state.
Okay, that's very helpful. I really appreciate that clarification.
So if anyone has any further comments, please let Ms. O'Neill know. Next item on the agenda. I'm not drinking it. Is the Hamilton Ave ball field discussion. Mr. Ricky, do you want to provide a background for us?
Good evening. I'd be happy to give you a little bit of background. The building we're sitting in today was opened in 2008. As Mr. Pecora and some other speakers this evening have spoken about, there were some concerns about the parking garage. There was a lawsuit that has been settled. There will be some work planned for this summer to remediate the problems with the parking garage. And I can give you a quick summary on that too, because I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. What's going to happen there is the top surface of that parking garage will be grinded down. There's a membrane which will be removed. Any deficiencies in the concrete will be fixed. A new membrane will be placed on top of it, and then new concrete placed on top of that as well. There'll also be some improvements to that parking area as well to make it more manageable and hopefully help people not flatten their tires pulling out of the garage. We've been listening. So at the Hamilton Avenue Building Committee meeting, the committee did authorize the chairman, Mr. Mazza, to approve up to $450,000 in improvements, and based on what we've heard from the architect, that should fit within the budget. The remaining funds in the budget, approximately $220,000, sit in that budget. And the chair and the board, the building committee, reached a consensus to send your board a letter asking what they would like to do with their remaining funds, those $220,000. And some of that discussion had to do with the exterior spaces and the playing field and the play area and the field. So as you know, you received a letter from Mr. Mazza asking what the board's intent was with that. Facilities Director Ron Madden and myself, we walked this site. We also looked at the original ed specifications. You'll see in my memo to you that specified that there should be some attention paid to that exterior spaces. We also know that there's some deficiencies outside. There's some rock outcroppings, there's some drainage issues, there is grading issues. There's a need for those resources. So my recommendation to you is that you ask the building committee to allocate those funds towards improvement of the outdoor areas.
Mr. Bernstein.
So I'm 100% supportive. My kids attended this school. That field needs a lot of work. I'd be happy to see it. I'm glad the garage is finally getting fixed. The question, though, is how have you been coordinating this with the Parks and Rec Department? Because obviously it's outside the walls of the school, and while there is a building committee and there is money, we probably do need to be coordinating that.
Correct. It would have to be coordinated with Parks and Recreation. They have some thoughts on programming, I believe, this field, but until they get it into condition, which they think is a programmable condition, you would really have to.
I guess the follow-on question, though, is have we started communicating with them?
Yes.
Who will be running the work? Will they be running it? Will the building committee be running it? And honestly, will Parks and Rec have any skin in the game? Because as we know, if you drive around any of the schools, we've got deficiencies at a lot of fields, not just here.
Okay. So my understanding is obviously the expense of the spending of any of the building committee funds have to be done by the committee. So they would authorize that work to be done. We would develop a scope of that work to be done. I'm sure it would be coordinated with the Parks Department. I don't know who's going to manage that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I could underscore if I may, though. I mean, as Jim and Ron have been, Peter, in very active conversations with this whole thing with Parks and Rec. I think the thing we have to manage carefully is the ownership from their end as we move forward on it. But they've been very active in this. There's been a lot of conversations with them on this. I mean, then part of the discussion points will be, if you redo this field, what is the nature of what's there? I mean, I don't want to open up the turf debate there, but that, you know, there've been those discussions. But so there is active discussion, and I think we have to go back and make sure, Jim, Ricky, that we're very clear, but we've been following up with them closely.
Right now, my recommendation, again, to you as the board to forward to the building committee would be, there's some concerns out there. If you walk that site, you will see there's some rock outcroppings, there's some drainage areas that need improvement, there's fencing that needs improvement, there's a grade issue, as Mr. Pecora said, from second base to the parking garage. There's a 6-foot difference, and part of that does have to do with the wells out here for the geothermal facility.
Mr. Scher.
Jim, I'm coming at this from a different perspective, and maybe I'm ill-informed. When we built the school, I presume we specified a field, and I presume we didn't get the field we specified, but maybe that's wrong. Here's my concern, and I agree with Mr. Bernstein. It's like one of the rules of poker. If you look around the table and you can't figure out who the sucker is, you're it. I'm very concerned that, you know, we're supposed to have a field out there that meets the needs, and I don't want us holding the bag, then shopping and begging other town departments, who, by the way, are really responsible for it, to deliver what was supposed to be delivered in the first place. So I don't know that anybody doesn't intend to do that for us, but I'm a little concerned that we're like, I don't want us to take this on where it winds up, now we're fighting a rearguard action that other people who were supposed to deliver it in the first place, and I'm not sure who that is, and are supposed to maintain our fields, actually do that part of the job. So I appreciate the collaboration. It's the only way anything's going to get done here. I'm sensitive. I don't want us to wind up as the sucker in this deal. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Thanks.
Ms. Dayton?
It's probably in the documents, but is playground equipment included in the project, or are we just talking about the actual surface of the field?
So in the original ed specs, the playground was spec'd and the playground was fulfilled. That part of it was fulfilled. Part of it just said that play area for older children and fields appropriate for elementary school children. And I think, as many people would agree, it's not ideal and it's not what we expect. Somebody even made a good comment earlier this evening. When people drive by the facility, what they see is the opinion that they can derive of a site as well. And I think that's what we're looking to do, is making a safer area, a more attractive area for everybody.
Dr. Francis?
I think it should be fixed. I'm not questioning that. A couple questions though. One is, do we have an estimate as to how much we think it will cost? So we're talking about releasing this amount, but will it be
sufficient?
Well, yeah, is that going to cover it? What are we going to have to do if we need to get more money? Where will that come from? And being relatively new to all this town stuff, is that where Parks and Rec might come in? How does that work? And then just as a separate issue, not to deny this issue, but are there any other big things that we should be thinking about, and how do we prioritize those things? Or are there any other problems that were left over now that the lawsuit is over that we should be thinking about?
The way I see this working out is, if you deem that you'd like to move forward with this, you would have to scope out, you'd inspect the site, scope out the issues, and identify those with greatest priority. So if you have rock in the field, outcroppings, if the fencing, and as you put your proposal together, you would identify a cost for each one of those items. Don't know what the total cost would be.
I'm sorry, I meant we've got the garage, we've got the fields. I don't know the school. Is there a roof leak someplace, or is there an electrical problem? Is there some other completely different issue that we also need to be aware of?
No, I mean we had a pipe break last week, but I'm all too familiar with that. But there's a little site work actually outside of this room or the other side of the room for a little grading, but smaller items like that. No major work.
Ms. O'Neill?
Why wouldn't we get the scope and be really clear about playground equipment and anything else that needs to be done, and if we're going to get stuck with planting trees or taking trees down? Why wouldn't we get the estimate and then see whether we have the money in the budget, and then determine who's going to pay the remainder? Because I'd be really surprised if it came in with the amount of money that we have. I'm all for fixing it, but I don't want to see us sitting there having to work out all of this when it's not our job.
Mr. Bernstein?
Well, so I think that's the right line of thinking. Obviously signaling my agreement that this needs to be done, but I think the building committee should take comfort knowing that there are several board members that have expressed that, but there may be more homework needed before we're ready to say we've got enough money, you've got agreement with Parks and Rec on a plan to go forward, to come to us for a final blessing. But I think the indication to you should be, go forth, do your homework, because we're ready to stand with you. We just need to know what that's going to be.
Ms. Applebaum?
I just wanted to clarify the question, because I was under the impression that the question really was the building, did we want to advise the building committee that whatever funds are left over after the garage is done, which is estimated to be around $150,000 at this point, I'm sorry, 450, pardon me. You know me in numbers, sorry. That whatever might be left over would be appropriated towards the work that needed to be done and had not been done properly on the field. And as far as the scope of project and everything else, it was more that that money would not be returned to the town or used in another area that did not connect to Hamilton Avenue School.
That's correct. Mr. Maz's memo or letter to the board does say that. Just the request is to see if the Board of Education desires to do any work on the fields. And again, what we wanted to do was we looked at the original ed specs. We wanted to walk the site, get an understanding of what could be needed. And my recommendation would be, yes, you would want that.
So in the
You
absence
want
of
to
a
design.
directive, the money is likely to be returned to the town and our field would go.
The project
Well,
would.
that's what we're talking about. But whether or not the 220 is enough or not, it should certainly be banked for the project, and then we're going to have to coordinate with other town departments and figure out how to get it done.
I mean, our understanding from administration is right now we're looking for a fairly simple directive from the Board of Ed, still with some details to be determined. Of that balance of funds as been requested, we would like that to, we were asking the board to say, yes, we would like that focused on the field. I think, Gaetan, this is sort of the next big priority for this space to be really functional educationally. The community is seen as they spoke tonight. So we have to come back with some details, but it's trying to get the board to lock in that is the focus. You may want to say we need to see more detail or something like that. But again, we don't want to have this money slip away to something else.
Mr. Scher.
Here's where I'm lost in this conversation. I wasn't on the board then. I got to imagine they wrote an education specification that said, give me a field like X, Y, and Z. It's flat. It's this big. So and so. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I got to imagine that. My understanding is that that's not what we got. So what I'm really interested in understanding is what amount of money does it take to get us back to what was originally specified and not delivered? If that number is within this 200,000, that's one question. Then you ask the next question, which is, do I want to get more money and do more than what was originally specified? The only reason, or I agree with you, we should not, and we should put together some kind of motion telling the building committee we want them to retain this money because we didn't get the field that we wanted and we want that fixed, if that's what the building committee needs. I think we need this other question answered, which is, to get the thing we want, does it cost more than is left over? If it is, we got to figure out who's going to solve that problem.
I mean, I think I would point to the legal opinion that was provided in the packet that whatever we authorize, it has to be clearly as a result of deficiencies from the construction. So I do have a motion I'm prepared to offer. But there are deficiencies. When the parking garage was built, the field was impacted. Yeah, but the garage directly impacted the field. So we have to be very clear about that. And then, it's a process, right? So we're going to have to figure out, is the field up to the ed specs that we had originally, put forth? And I think the answer is no. But, the litigation, there's a lot of history here. So we're taking steps. Dr. Francis.
Again, being very new to this, but I mean, my sense is that we all support making the field what it needs to be.
Yep.
My sense is there's also some concern about who's somewhat responsible or should be involved in this. We all agree, I think, that the money that's there should be kept by the building committee to do what it needs to do, but is there an advantage to not necessarily saying something specific in the motion, but something more broad that says, we want the building committee to keep this money to complete corrections of deficiencies or something, but that doesn't set us in a situation we can't bring Parks and Rec in if that's what they're supposed to do?
I mean, I think it's a practical matter. The building committee has dissolved. The building was turned over to the Board of Ed probably in 2008 or so. The building committee did convene for this purpose once the litigation was resolved and there were some monies returned to the town. But I don't think that the building committee would actually be the party that would go forward with the work. I think it would have to be some sort of collaboration between the Board of Ed and Parks and Rec. And I think that is the step that would logically take place once there's some money. Do you agree?
Yes, and if I could indulge the board just very quickly. In the original education specs, it said a play area for older children and fields appropriate for elementary school children must be provided. Parentheses, it says, if possible, the fields should be large enough to support adult softball and soccer. And that's really the one point on the ed spec regarding the field portion of the...
We got to work on our ed specs first.
So there is some ambiguity there. This is from 2004.
So could I make a motion if there's no other discussion? So I move that the Board of Education directs the Hamilton Avenue Building Committee to address grading, drainage, and rock outcroppings not adequately addressed during construction of the Hamilton Avenue School and parking garage. Will that do it? Mr. Pecor, do you want to shed light on that? As a member of the Building Committee?
If I'm not mistaken, the building committee is looking for you and the Board of Parks and Rec to put this together. You got to approve it first. You got to approve the money to be used towards that. No money could be spent on specifications unless there's some cash around. And if you don't approve that 220,000 or whatever is more is there, then we won't be able to do anything. So you have to approve it based on you own the land and Parks is responsible to take care of it. Joe Cislano's well aware of all this. I've talked to him about it. He tried his best to get some basic information to give us what he thinks generally it will be from some engineer that works with the town on a project now with the middle schools. So it's got to be, it can't go back to the building committee because I don't think the building committee is part and parcel.
Well, the building committee still has authorization over these funds, as I understand it, which is why you convened to authorize the expenditure on the parking garage. So I'm, in response to Mr. Mazza's letter to the board that was addressed to me, I'm trying to be responsive. And then whether or not that 220 or whatever's left over from the parking garage plus the 220, wherever that is ultimately transferred or lodged to do the capital project, that will have to happen.
Right.
And the point is, the building committee right now has authorization over those funds. It is not expected that the building committee would continue to meet to do the work. I mean, your work is done.
And they want to turn it over to the Board of Ed. Yeah, I think the motion has to be used. That's the key. It's got to lay in your hands. It's your property.
Well, I think it's up to the, okay, so I'll read the motion again and then we can determine if it's sufficient. So the motion is to, the Board of Education directs the Hamilton Avenue Building Committee to address the grading, drainage, and rock outcroppings not adequately addressed during the construction of the Hamilton Avenue School and parking garage. So I guess the motion could be amended to direct the Hamilton Avenue Building Committee to set aside the funds of 220 plus whatever, I don't know how state reimbursements are.
My recommendations just say that the balance of the remaining funds from the project
The
be
balance of the
used to
remaining
address
funds from the
these
project.
deficiencies.
I don't believe there is. I mean, the legal opinion is pretty clear that it,
I guess what I'm saying, Laura, is I think you're on the right track, which is, they can say they're not going to execute it or they don't exist, or that's baloney, they exist. And,
well, there's only a few.
I know that. I mean, I realize the world moved on, but legally that thing still exists. My only point is, I think you're right. You have to tell them they got to fix it. Now, what Mr. Pecora is saying is, as a practical matter, after we do that, right, then we got to get real about who's able to execute that, right? The point is, I don't think the board needs to address that in a motion tonight. I'd like these guys to go have a bigger conversation and come back and have the answer. What I am saying for sure is, which is why I think your motion may work, is we're going back to the legal entity saying you own the problem, you got to fix it, And by the way, if we want to say also, we agree you should use the remaining funds in the account. Okay, but that also, it's still going to leave open the question of who's going to do it and is it enough? Let's not confuse ourselves. We're not solving that problem through this
I
motion.
agree, and that's Mr. Ricky's job, to figure that out. Right, Jim?
Absolutely.
Can we
Ms.
just look at the cover memo? I think the words are there, they're clear. I'm sure we can craft a motion from the cover memo.
So I withdraw my motion. Jennifer, would you like to enter the motion that's on the cover memo?
Yes, I would. I move that the Board of Education approve that the Hamilton Avenue Building Committee use remaining project funds to improve the grading, drainage, and rock outcroppings at the Hamilton Avenue School.
She was changing it just to make it, that's the action that we're taking. We're approving that.
No, the only reason I'm saying it, the only thing I'm saying it is I don't want to emphasize on this releasing the dollars. I want that to be secondary. I want the emphasis on you got to fix it.
Okay, so can I offer the amendment, the languages Jennifer just read, adding at the Hamilton Avenue School that were not adequately addressed during the construction of the school and the parking garage. I think that's the first part of the motion. We're just directing them essentially to use the money for this purpose and not to return it to the town because our field is not where it needs to be. Ms. O'Neill?
But I still, I'm so fine with saying we're releasing the money, go fix whatever, but we still don't know how much it's going to cost, who's going to then fill in what's needed. There's too many unknowns to just, I could see releasing the money, sort of, but there's just too many unknowns to really do that.
Well, this is the necessary first step, otherwise we won't have the money. Is everyone clear on the motion?
I withdraw my motion so that Ms. Erickson can offer the amendment.
The Board of Education directs the Hamilton Avenue Building Committee to address grading, drainage, and rock outcroppings not adequately addressed during the construction of the Hamilton Avenue School and parking garage, using the remaining funds in the capital projects, that's not the right term, using the remaining funds in the capital projects account. You second? All right. Mr. Bernstein, second. All those in favor? Those opposed? Those abstaining? 701. Okay, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda was removed from the consent agenda, E002, whole student development. Board discussion? Ms. O'Neill?
To first thank Mrs. Ford for answering all my probably tedious questions. She's great patience. But as I look at that report and the responses, and although I support SEL learning activities, SEL instruction is becoming more important, and it's taking time and valuable class time to deliver it. And so if we feel that it's valuable to use class time, then I believe we should have a standardized curriculum with clear goals and metrics. And a teacher should have professional development, and the time should be indicated as to where this curriculum should be taught. Right now, it varies from a few minutes a week to 30 minutes, so it's all over the place. So if this is a curriculum, which it seems to be, It should follow all our other curriculums and have goals and metrics and so on and so forth, and be approved by the board. It should follow board policy.
Any further discussion? Is there a motion to accept the report?
So moved.
Ms. Dayton? Is there a
But-
second?
Well, I think before we do that, I thought there'd be some discussion. I'd like to make a motion that that SEL then come to the board as a curriculum, as all other curriculums should do. And so that's my motion. If it's a curriculum and we're spending class time, then it should come before the board for approval.
So what's before us tonight is the acceptance of the report.
But I want to make this amendment so that, and we can approve the report if we choose to, but I think it's important that this shouldn't continue to go on as a bunch of activities that are important and should be consistent like everything else we do or try to do. So that's my motion, that it should come back to the board as a standardized curriculum.
So your motion is to have it come back to the board as a standardized
Right,
curriculum?
and they can come back at these things don't get done instantly. I appreciate that. You come back by the beginning of the next school year or whatever, that's fine. So it's not like it has to be done instantly.
Mr. Bernstein?
I mean, I guess I'd like to hear from the administration, because this is obviously a big change from what we've been doing, and I certainly appreciate Barbara's points. It is something that is creeping in and taking time. It's a valuable thing, and as a valuable thing, I think maybe we should be documenting it a bit more, but I'd love to hear from Bill and Mary on that one.
Well, I mean, Mary, if you want to start, but I guess an overarching point is reviewing what this would entail would make sense. We do have within the strategic plan under strategy area 3, in a sense this would fit right there to at least review what this would mean. I think I'd like us to take a look at what would entail in terms of how far we are away from it actually being a curriculum and all the rest. But there is quite a logical fit here with strategy 3, and that is a core principle now, particularly with the 3 goals of personal and interpersonal. But I don't know if.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, I think, go ahead, Mary.
I think if you look at the strategic plan, what we were looking at was really identifying a program or a framework for addressing behaviors. Some of those approaches and programs have actual lessons and curriculum that go with them, others don't. So what I may need to do is relook at how I phrase the strategic plan to give you information both on the approach to behavior, which would be the program, versus what the curricular activities would be, that would be the lessons to teach the skills.
Got a follow-up.
Mr. Bernstein?
I guess, Bill and Mary, how much time would you need to study this? Because I understand where Barbara's going, but I do want to hear from you and give you that opportunity, but I don't want too long to go by.
I mean, in terms of looking, I mean, there's a lot of work underway in this area. It is a lot of sets of activities and all the rest. I think to understand that shifting into being a curriculum would require some time to make sure we build on what's right here. I think we might want a little time to kind of look at what this would take. I think the important news here is we have a match. I mean, the strategic plan says SEL matters, it should be core, it should be fundamental. Bringing that into a curriculum focus makes sense to me. I think we just wanted, sitting here in March, if we were to say, given everything else we're facing to get done, that's why I'm tying it to the strategic plan. Is there a way to look at that aspect of it and say, could this become a way to at least understand what it means to make it a curriculum, is from what's been asked. I don't have an easy answer to that right now. I'm just saying there is a logic match between what we've said as a priority in the strategic plan and what Barbara's asking for. But I mean, sort of the first before me right now tonight, so it's hard to answer on the spot. But I don't know, Mary, if you have a thought on timeline.
Well, I think what I need to do in the strategic plan is to be clear about some definitional issues, about what's the difference between an approach to behavior, which it does not have lessons or curriculum associated with it, and the curriculum to teach the skills, which actually would be something that would be taught that would require time. And the third piece, which some of the schools do, and I'm not sure how I communicate it to you, but they infuse the lessons in some of the other activities. So for example, during reading, they'll read a book and then they'll comment on the character traits of the person, and is this someone who followed the norms of being here? So there's an infusion, there's a teaching, and there's a programmatic behavioral framework. And I apologize, I didn't think that I probably need to be clearer to you about how we're approaching it in those three different ways.
What if I were to suggest the following? It would be, what I think the motion's very clear. How would you develop a curriculum for SEL in the Greenwich Public Schools? How would our existing activities be formed into that, support that? What I'd like us to do is just say, what's it going to take to do that? And come back to the board to say, here's what it would take to do that, and then have that discussion with the board relative to other things you want us to do. Because it could be that it would be something we could do quite reasonably. It might, though, require more time. I mean, I just want, given it's the first tonight hearing what it would take to do it right, I don't want to promise we'd be back by the fall when it may not be regulated. We might be able to be back, but I think we have to sort of take, as administration, take a step back. The board's asked for this, if that's where the rest of the board is, frame this into a curriculum, but what would it take to do that, and come back and tell you what that would take? Is that a clear response? I don't know.
Yeah. Ms. Applebaum and then Mr. Scher.
We have a process for approving curriculum. So it goes through the curriculum council and then it comes to us. So I would like to try and stay consistent with our process. So if there was a way, in light of what Dr. McCursey said about let us figure out what the scope is, but then also connecting that into that process, which I think would have new courses, new curriculum come to us to then be approved so that we stay within our own process. And so if there's some way to make that connection and timing, I think that would be better.
Mr. Scher?
I agree 100% with what Ms. Applebaum said. This is where this is already showing up, board. Phil and I tried to go away and start to look tighter at measurements in whole parts of the strategy. You get to this, it's like murky, murky, murky. Part of the reason it's murky is, and when you say I want to measure it, I want to say how well are we doing on this strategically, because it's such an emphasis in our vision of the graduate. It's an emphasis in our mission. It's state required. It needs to be taught. I think what we learned and it doesn't have to mean that it's exactly the same in every school, but the curricular standards that are reflected in a curriculum, those should be rendered explicit. And I agree with what Ms. Applebaum says. It doesn't make any sense to me that we would have all of these things that we want teachers to teach, and just because it's a core academic subject, is rendered in a traditional way that Irene would do it. And then we've got this one other piece of what we want taught, and it isn't following that framework at all. That doesn't make any sense to me. It seems to me we should follow the same framework, and that's what I interpret, unless you're going to tell otherwise, that's what I think Ms. O'Neill is proposing, is that we take this, we develop a curriculum to it, and I don't think, unless someone's going to tell me, by doing that, we're straitjacketing individual schools and teachers about how they teach that. This is declaring in much greater specificity the what needs to get taught, and that makes a lot of sense to me. To your point, Bill, I don't think your motion has anything about the timing of that, right? The administration, we're just declaring, which I think we can do. We can say, okay, that's got to happen, and the motion, just this is a question, the motion does not say it needs to happen by this date.
Right.
I think that's open for the administration to come tell us.
I thought I heard before the next school year. Did I not hear that correctly?
Was that in there?
It wasn't actually part of what I was trying to indicate, was that I didn't expect it.
So to go back to Mrs. Applebaum's and whatever. So the idea is to have a curriculum, not to straitjacket anybody, but if we feel this is valuable, we should have goals, we should have metrics, we should have professional development, and so on and so forth. And it should go through the regular curriculum development process. But if we're using class time and we think it's important, then it should be a curriculum and it should be approved.
Dr. Francis?
I sometimes get confused with our different use of the term curriculum. I mean, I'm sort of thinking of this more of, I could envision this more as how we talk about, Common Core standards, right? We've always said there are standards, we need to meet those standards, but we in Greenwich determine, what we want the overall questions to be, and then the teachers actually often are figuring out the lessons to achieve that. And I would like, if we're going to do something, I think to me what would be most appropriate is that we're asking for that higher level of sort of what are the standards that we would like to make sure all of our schools are achieving with the students. But I don't know that I would want to get to the point, and I think there's agreement, I've heard this,
Lesson plan.
that it's getting down to lessons plans, that it's saying that every school needs to use the same program. I mean, they've developed these things, and what we want to do is make sure that there are metrics or there are ways to say, is this meeting this higher level of standard, but that you're not necessarily writing and saying, okay, each school needs to meet for half an hour on Mondays to use and I can't remember the names of the various things that different schools are using, but there's a sense that there is some responsibility to go back and make sure that it's meeting some standard or some overall goal, and it seems like those would be great ways to go back into the strategic plan. But I would like what we're asking for to be high level. So that's where I get a little nervous about the term curriculum, because I've heard that term used in so many different ways. I think it's a little less clear.
To be grossly simple, just help. We have standards, then the curriculum's how you deliver on the standards from the plan. The actual delivery of it, though, is the instruction. So we would be somewhere, yes, there may be standards on SEL that would inform our curriculum, but it's not then into the actual delivery. We wouldn't get into that. My main concern was at some point we'd want to put a date delivery on it, because the board would become impatient with at least me with, what are you doing? Where is it? So I just want to be true to the board on this. I think we have a match here, frankly. I just want to have a timeline that's sensible for us and is sensible for you. So that's where we approve the motion. It's not time limited. I would just commit to coming back after working with Mary, Alina, and some others to say, what would it take to do this? And what's our timeline to come back to the board and say here, and it may fit within the curriculum council process, it may not. That's all I'm saying. I don't know, Mary.
I guess my question would be, do you want me to approach this through the SEL Safe School Climate piece, or would it make more sense for me to amend the strategic plan activities?
I think that's why we need to give the administration time to address this.
Can I make a friendly amendment to you, Mary? Let us go back and figure that out. Let us say, here's the question. The board is saying we want a curriculum for SEL. And I think then we need to come back and say, what would that look like? How would we build that in? I think it has to tie into the strategic plan, but I think we need a little time to figure that out and come back, which is, here's our plan to deliver on that, which may include a strategic plan shift, maybe that doesn't. I'm getting murmuring to my left, but we need to figure that out.
Mr. Bernstein?
So let me posit an idea, Bill. Why don't you take the time between now and the next work session to come up with a calendar? Because I think you're right. We're going to want dates. We're going to want to know when we're going to hear from you again. Not asking for the big swing stuff, asking you to kind of start to scope out what would it take to get there, and let's get it on the agenda plan. And that way we know when you're coming back, and that will give you a roadmap.
So now we're just asking for information about what it would take.
Yeah, I want to come back with a thoughtful plan. We're in the middle of trying to get a budget through. We got all,
So maybe he can't give an answer right now. March 10th means that the materials really have to be posted next week.
We're talking about big dates. We're not talking about specific plans.
I do think that there's a broad scope. You got to look at what is, what could be, how might it be, who would be involved, and then all the time frames. So I respectfully understand. So the timing piece, I would say, come back to us and give us a date soon. But
I think we could come back in April with here's a more thoughtful plan with dates.
Well, there's a motion, but I think. Okay.
I'm sorry, did you want to amend the motion?
Do you want to repeat the motion, Sonia? If you can remember it, at 10 o'clock?
I recommend that the administration develops an SEL curriculum with goals and metrics, professional development. You can even leave that out. They develop a curriculum for the delivery of SEL curriculum. Develop a curriculum for SEL. Okay.
Sir, did you sure second the motion? Well, any further discussion? I don't think so. I think she just gave it the best she had. We can listen to the tape.
It's just saying, please go develop an SEL.
Mr. Bernstein.
So while I'm open to the discussion, I'm still not convinced we need a curriculum. I think there's a lot of work to do before we get to that point, so I'll be voting no on the motion.
But you're voting no because you want to see a plan beforehand? Is that it?
I would like to hear the administration come forward with, this is what should be in, this is what shouldn't be in. They haven't had any time to think about it. So I'm willing to give them the time to thoughtfully come up with where we see a curriculum. I don't want to give a broad directive without them having any opportunity to have a discussion with us first. I'd like to actually get that part going before we dictate curriculum.
I think they've already agreed to develop the curriculum, and what they're looking for now is the time to plan it out.
Ms. Applebaum?
I was actually more leaning with Mr. Bernstein. I would be more comfortable with what we've said is right now to direct them to develop a scope and plan to explore a curriculum for SEL, and let's see how and where that falls, and then the next step would be to actually execute something. Does that
Saying,
make
Mr.
sense?
Bernstein? So it's the same difference.
Call the question.
All those in favor?
Wait, okay. Let me withdraw my motion. And let's go back and reword it, that we direct the administration to come to the board with the scope and sequence for a curriculum without a timeline. So we direct them.
Could I respectfully, just a suggestion. I mean, it seems like these discussions are sometimes had at policy governance committee meetings. I mean, I don't recall that this was discussed, but when we talked about the monitoring report, when we talked about E001, what's a program, what's a service, what's a curriculum, it seems like some of these issues should properly be fleshed out at the committee level before because this is where we get into trouble, is when the board issues directives not knowing what else is going on and what the priorities are, and I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with the process. I support the intent.
But this is important. This is curriculum. This is class time. This is part of the strategic plan. So it should be a priority, or else we ought to just stop teaching it. So my motion is that we directed the administration to come up with a timeline in which to develop a curriculum for SEL.
And as Ms. Applebaum points out, we do have a curriculum process. The board does review every spring what's being reviewed.
But wait a second, this is different. We're asking them to come up with a timeline. We're not, when they come through the curriculum, it will go through the curriculum process. It will go through the whole thing with Irene and whatever.
So now, just so I'm clear,
I don't want to belabor the point. I think this board is disciplined enough that says we're only going to talk about these things when the topic is on the agenda. The topic is on our agenda because the report is showing up. It's the one time of year that we're talking about this. I think the better way to think about this is said, this program has been delivered. We're talking about this program. That was the purpose of the monitoring report. The program has been delivered this way in the past. There have been changes since we last looked at this. There have been state changes. There have been a strategic plan change and what have you. All I think that's the reason I'm supporting it is it's saying, which I think the board should do, the board should not talk about the how. That's what we're drifting into. But the board is supposed to say, the what. And in this case, I think all that's trying to be expressed, that I'm trying to vote for, is expressed to the administration. Now that this monitoring report is before us, I want to move it out of program into something more formal, into something more structured, because it is a more important part rendered explicit in our strategic plan. To leave it out there as this undefined kind of program, when we've said it's so important to us strategically, that just seems to me to be an execution disconnect on the part of the board. And our role in this is not to get into how and when. That's Bill's job and the staff's job. But I do think we have to signal we think it's at this level of importance. And that's what I think this is really about. I think if we drift off into anything else, then we're getting ourselves into deep water. That's why I thought your mission made sense, because it's a simple declaration of it lives at this level. It should be a curriculum because it fits to our strategic plan. And be done with it, and let Bill go work on the rest of it about the how, the when, all the rest of it. I think when we shouldn't murky it up. I think we should declare we want it to be a curriculum or we don't. That's how I'm seeing it.
Ms. Applebaum?
I think that's where I'm now having a question, because again, it's going back to what Dr. Francis said about, are we talking about standards or are we talking about curriculum? What I thought we had gotten to in our discussion was we need to figure out what is and what will need to be done in order to get to the next step, and to specify curriculum versus, it may be that the programming, if programming is within the curriculum. It's all a little murky, so I'd really like to get a tutorial about here's what we have, here's what we got, here's how it's going to connect to the strategic plan, and move forward, and then go from that.
I think we all understand what curriculum means, or we should at this point. We approve curriculum all the time, and we read monitoring reports about curriculum. So I don't think that should be unclear, and I don't think we need a tutorial about it. So either we're going to vote to have the SEL developed into a curriculum, and that's the motion. I'm just going to leave it at that we're directing the administration to develop a curriculum for SEL.
Dr. Flanagan?
Suggestion. Since Mrs. Parisi isn't here, would it be acceptable to the board to have Mrs. Ford and Mrs. Parisi meet before the next board meeting and either draft a memo to you saying why they think that it is a curriculum or it isn't a curriculum, and the board can then discuss that memo at the next board meeting to decide whether they want to move forward and with this vote?
I support Dr. Flanagan's idea very strongly. Let's get more information.
But I'm just thinking about where it would fit within the curriculum, or off the top of my head, in the health curriculum. What state standards are there that we would have to comply with? There is a lot of curriculum background and knowledge that I certainly am not going to be purporting myself to be an expert on, but I think just without that guidance, it seems that the board, is having a very long discussion about something that we might be able to address if Mrs. Parisi were here.
Dr. Francis?
So I think it's a good idea that we do this. On the other hand, I sort of feel like just the same way we present things to the public, give them the chance to comment and come back, I do feel like this is sort of a quick thing that we've done with the administration. So I do think it'd be very reasonable to say, we're going to address this again at our next meeting, bring it up, and then we can vote on it at that time when they've had an opportunity to brainstorm it a little bit more and give us some feedback.
So for purposes of moving the item forward on the agenda planning, I could place it on the next meeting for the purposes of discussing the memo that Dr. Flanagan just promised Ms. Parisi and Ms. Ford would create. Would that serve to provide... Right, so Ms. O'Neill, given that information, would you be willing to withdraw the motion to the next meeting, or?
In the interest of time, I will, but I still think we're making a mistake. But yes, I will withdraw it.
All right, so for agenda planning, we're going to add it to the discussion. And you know what, before we do that, I think we have to figure out when they can write the memo, so I'm not going to put it on any date certain. All right, now can I have a motion to approve the monitoring report for, well, do we want to do that now? Right now, we're still talking about E002, the monitoring report. Can I have a motion to approve the monitoring report?
So moved.
Is there a second? Ms. Applebaum? All those in favor of approving the E002 monitoring report? All those opposed? Approved. All those abstaining? 602. Now we're moving on to E060.
Laura,
Yes.
who abstained?
Ms. O'Neill, Mr. Scher. Now we're moving on to E060, Administrator Code of Ethics. Mr. Stacy, I'm going to open this up for board discussion.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Is there, you wanted to take it out of the consent agenda, so we're just... No, I think he's just here to answer board questions. Unless you'd like to make a speech, Mr. Stacy.
I'd love to. Can I delay for how long?
Ms. O'Neill?
Okay, so I took this out of the consent agenda because I firmly believe that although teachers might be aware of the standards for professional development, and they receive it when they receive their contract and so on and so forth, just as we believe that SEL is important for students and that they need reminders, I do think that we should have procedures as part of our policy that would actively engage teachers, and I don't want to be specific about it, but they can do it at faculty meetings, they could do whatever, but I think it's important, and I think there was a good number of the board members at the last meeting who also felt that just handing someone a piece of paper was not adequate if we really wanted to have everyone very aware of their own behavior and their impact on student behavior.
So, Mr. Stacy did provide the board a memo codifying some of what takes place in the district with respect to teacher administrative code of ethics that is posted as an addendum on board docs. And the question that I posed earlier today to Mr. Stacy was, could that memo be codified into procedures that we would actually post to this policy? Is that a doable task? Sure, Mr. Scher?
If I could, just before questions, I received an email that was sent to me later this afternoon, asking if I could come prepared to discuss how the elements of the memo I provided be codified into procedures. So I have taken the memo that was provided as an addendum and provided a draft of a procedure for consideration this evening.
Mr. Scher?
Bob, can I ask a question? Because all certified employees are given a copy of the code with their salary agreements every year. Could you describe in detail what is the salary agreement? What do they get? Or is how do they accept? I presume they accept that. I mean, what actually happens there?
Certainly. On an annual basis, every certified employee receives a letter to them spelling out what their compensation is for the next year. And there's one copy they keep for themselves, one copy that's signed and returned back to the Human Resources Department.
Does that letter include an actual reference to the Connecticut Code of Professional Conduct Responsibilities for Teachers or Administrators, depending on what you are, as well as the Town of Greenwich Ethics Policy?
It has not in the past, but it's incorporated into a draft adjustment we've made to that for this year.
Okay. I don't know, I'll let others ask questions, and I got a comment.
Does anyone else have a question? Ms. Day?
I read it very quickly in the last 5 seconds, but it looks like it covers all the points in your earlier presentation to us, that you gave to us verbally. It looks like it covers it. And I am swayed by the remarks of Ms. Sutton, who made a very strong case that we don't need to go beyond what's here.
Mr. Bernstein?
So I do this in my professional life, and I have 300,000 plus employees that I do this with on an annual basis. Sometimes it's not just enough to give somebody a paper copy of something. Sometimes you need to reinforce that. And so, we do professional development in a lot of areas. Sometimes our teachers are already experts in those areas, and yet they're involved in that professional development. I think we need to take the opportunity to talk about this at least once a year. Whether it's through communication, whether it's through convocation or elsewhere, even a short online video module involving the union, I think is a very healthy thing to do. I do note the reference, the last bullet point, the town ethics policies provided the new hires with their payroll pack, they sign off on it. What happens when those procedures and policies change? We presumably have employees in the district who signed that a long time ago, and presumably it's changed since the dawn of time. How do we communicate that to existing staff?
I have not been here when that's happened before, Mr. Bernstein. I can find out the answer to that question for you. I know the town has an ethics committee or an ethics board and procedures that are in place, but I'll get some information back to you on that.
Mr. Scher?
So, Bob, if I'm understanding this right, I'm on the certification part. We're essentially installing a certification procedure, annual certification procedure by, or an attestation by every single one of our employees through their salary agreement.
Correct.
Okay. I like Ms. Here's where let me clear off what I was concerned about as it relates to our employees. I'm thrilled that the president of the union representing teachers, and I'd like to hear from the other union leaders as well, have represented on the record in public in an official meeting. They've now stated that they accept the professional code of conduct as the governance, as already written. They accept presumably the ethics statement, but they essentially said it's, our teachers are already trained. That means that there should be absolutely no ambiguity whatsoever for any employee that ever comes before us again with an assertion that somehow it was unclear what the code of conduct was supposed to be. That was my primary concern, particularly coming out of what we just spent an inordinate amount of time with Mr. Yoon. So what I take it as to say is we now know that it's accepted because of the references the GA president made as defined by the State Department of Education and as taught already in the presumably the state university system that's responsible for teacher training. Whatever's in that training is what effectively defines what this code means. And that therefore, because they are fully trained and they are continuously retrained and recertifying through certification as well as attesting in the town of Greenwich, that essentially becomes the definition for all teachers as well as standards for any teacher-specific agreements, like in the case of Mr. Yoon, the last chance agreement. So this is beginning to make me more comfortable because now we have the actual representative of our employees saying that they are sufficiently trained, they accept the training that was done elsewhere, therefore there should be no ambiguity, and we would not get that assertion by any employee going forward. So this actually, from my perspective, solves a major problem that appeared in the Yoon case, and I'm glad that it will actually be resolved. I still think, as an aside, it's good practice on our part, just as an employer, to find additional ways, as Mr. Bernstein is talking about, to reinforce this. But now we're in a meets minimum situation where this won't become an issue before us, and the fact that Mr. Stacy is recommending changing it so that we now have attestation, I've become a lot more comfortable that we will avoid problems in this area in the future.
Ms. O'Neill?
So that covers minimum requirements.
That does.
I'm not sure that's what the Greenwich Standard is, and I'm glad it does cover. So it doesn't seem to me that is adequate to make sure that all our teachers are very aware of the standards and their responsibility to themselves, their colleagues, and their students and their parents. And I just find it hard to believe that we can't find 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, once a year or whatever, to have a discussion of that. I mean, we could hand the high school kids the SEL curriculum and say, sign on it, you've read it, that's all we expect of you. It's the same thing. We're expecting the minimum, and I'm not so sure that that's where I am. I don't think that meets the standard for Greenwich, that we would only expect teachers to have read it if they've read it. We have teachers coming from various states, various teacher training colleges. Some don't even come through the teacher training colleges, so we have no guarantee that they're even aware of it, except for receiving that written form. So I don't know. I'm really quite surprised, puzzled, and frustrated that there's an unwillingness to, we got them in writing now as a procedure, but we're unwilling to go to that next step and have some active engagement of both the administrators and the staff as to what is professional behavior and what it means in the town of Greenwich.
Well, I'm going to take exception with that personally and professionally because I was never asked to do that. This was brought to my attention this morning at 10-something in the morning, and I was asked to take the addendum that I made and turn it into a procedure. I was not asked to add anything to it. I've never, in any of my presentations, said that I was unwilling to try and factor this into any training out there. So
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about...
It's being directed at me, so I took it personally. Sorry.
Ms. Dayton and then Ms. Applebaum.
Yeah, I'd like to point out the bottom of page 2, the last sentence in the last bullet. If anything could be clearer, I don't know what it would be. It says the TEPL committee will revise the evaluation document as necessary to ensure compliance with the state codes. About the core of how we evaluate teachers, how we promote teachers, how we develop teachers, how we give them tenure. It's embedded in the core going forward.
Actually, I think it's part of the existing TEPL rubric, is it not, Dr. Flanagan?
Yes.
Do you have anything to add to this conversation?
A part of the TEPL rubric under professional responsibilities, it's specifically cited that teachers are expected to comply with and adhere to the Code of Professional Responsibilities for Teachers. And we use it when there's a violation of the code. It's used within the language of the disciplinary letter or warning or reprimand.
Mr. Bernstein.
Bob, don't take it personally, but thank you for your work. Okay, first of all. But second, I think we do need to get above the standard. The standard is give everybody the code. That's great. We've done that. I think talking about it is what makes it valuable. I think it reinforces the message. And frankly, I think the board, the administration, and the teachers should be working together to embrace this as a way to be better. We can always get better. And if we don't talk about this, then we're left in a position where we're using it as an enforcement mechanism as opposed to something positive.
Ms. Applebaum?
I'd like to go back to the comment about minimum standard, because I personally take exception. In all of my years in the district, I think we have exceptional teachers and staff, and to think that any of them are only operating at minimal standards is just uncomfortable to me. I think we have a mechanism in place for those small number of individuals who might need assistance in performing better, who may not be exhibiting exactly the behavior as an educator that we might be looking for. But as far as a burden of time, which I think is one of the things that we said, we're constantly looking for time from educating students, that to prescribe something is a little uncomfortable to me. I understand the thought process. I understand the intent of making sure that everyone in our district is performing in a professional manner, but I really take exception to the fact that there's a perception that that's not the case.
Dr. Francis?
I really feel badly to think that the discussion we had would imply that we don't think our teachers are adequate. And, I have all of 15 staff members that I work with on trying to improve these kinds of things. And on a very small scale, there are things that we do to talk about service excellence, to talk about how you treat patients. And yeah, we have things that are on the wall, but I think in general, we have a fantastic staff. I think we have an excellent group in my office. And I think they appreciate when we take that time at a staff meeting or at other times to just sort of go over some of the things like, okay, things have gotten a little rough in this area. How are ways that we can do this? Or how do we support each other? It's not saying that these people aren't doing a good job or that they're not professionals, but it's saying this is an important aspect of what we're doing. And I said last meeting, I understand the really difficult, aspect of trying to take more time from the teachers in any ways, but I do think it would be something that would just be nice for us to hear. We talk about issues at staff meetings, we talk about issues at certain things, or what is it that we're doing to reinforce this? And I think that's the image I had. And I hate to impose this, but I would love to feel that the administration and the teachers are embracing the opportunity to just have the opportunity to air these issues or go over things, or to say, I had this issue with a student or whatever it may be, but to do it in a somewhat more formal way that we can say as a board, yes, we understand that these ethics, these principles, these concepts of how we treat each other and students is something that we review at some interval. And that's sort of what would make me happy. I don't know that I want to impose it.
Ms. O'Neill, and then Dr.
Yeah, I never meant, and maybe if people are late and getting tired, but I never meant to say that our staff functions at a minimum level. What I'm saying is that we are asking for minimum compliance by handing them a piece of paper. And as I said before, I think more highly of the Greenwich staff and think that they perform at a high level, but we can all benefit, as Peter has said, as Dr. Francis has said, we can all benefit from an engagement, an active engagement with it, and a discussion of it. And we're talking about time. We're talking about faculty meetings. I mean, there's time. Just go to a faculty meeting. There's time. So it's not a time issue. It's what our expectations are.
Dr. McCarthy?
Yeah, I think I can move this ball down the field for us, because particularly if we can sort of partition the concerns around, and I think it's been helpful that board members saying we're not making a negative comment here, we're saying how can we go further. So let's park that to the side. I appreciate that positive comment. We do a lot of this all the time, and I purposely stood up to say compassion and excellence, excellence, compassion. Every single administrator got a handwritten note from me at the Leadership Institute this fall saying, your commitment is to compassion and excellence. I keep coming back to that. So we do this. I insist on it. So what we need to do is help the board see very definitely, you know, maybe within the procedures there needs to be another statement or two that without doesn't pin us on how, but that we can find ways to assure the board that we have these conversations, we have these interactions, we set the standard, we care about it. I mean, a week doesn't go by when I don't have a conversation with cabinet members about appropriate behaviors of our professionals. So we just need to then figure a way, because a lot of this personnel matters which we can't talk about, but those conversations are going on all the time, both formally and informally. So that's our commitment. I've seen it, I've lived it now here. So we need to figure out a way to communicate to the board and assure the board that that is going on. So that, because nobody disagrees with the need for us to do that and to go deeper on it. None of us
I'm where
disagree
you
with
are.
that.
I know darn well this happens. And I know they're, 99.5% of our teachers, or other administrators or staff, this is not an issue. I think a simple way that would just get me comfortable, because I don't want to get into the how. If you turned around to me and said, we spend 32 hours on professional development. I'm committing to take 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, you pick the number, and I'm going to say we're going to, my problem is not what happens kind of bubbling throughout the system. I'm looking for something to be done standard way, programmatically, across the district. And I would be really happy if someone would turn around and say, yep, by the way, we got to teach people on curriculum, we got to teach them on methods, we got to do all that. On top of that, I'm going to take a little piece of this, it's going to be a priority, and we're going to spend, you guys define it, 2 hours next year taking a part of the code, and we're going to pick apart, and we're going to make emphasis on it. Because I agree with Ms. O'Neill, attestation is a meets minimum, right? What I just want is a little more emphasis on it. I'm not looking for it to be the thing that ate Greenwich Public Schools.
I mean, that to me, I think there shouldn't be sort of a concern like yes or no. I mean, all the administrators, beyond what I told you, their introduction of Bob Stacy was, how long was your session, Bob? 2.5 hours on this.
Correct.
At North Street School this fall. And so we can bring this in and weave it in, because we're already doing it, but we can sort of bring that sort of structure to it and then find a way to explain to you what that is, programmatically.
Ms. Dayton?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think I've been heard by the board members, so I'm going to make my point again. If it's embedded in TEPL, what more could you possibly wish for? You're talking about evaluating the teachers.
I'm a little unclear, because has the board ever directed how the 37 hours of professional development are to be spent before? I mean, to me, that is management.
I think Peter is saying how many hours. I think he was just sort of giving an overview of whatever. But I think Bill gets it. I think he understands what it is that the board is asking for. We're asking for something that explains in a systematic way what it is that the district is doing to make sure all administrators and teachers are actively engaged in understanding the professional standards.
So I want to thank Mr. Stacy, because he did work today to put together the memo in a procedure form. So typically, those procedures would get posted after the board has the opportunity to comment. So I think that process can move forward. I think what I'm hearing is that there's work happening in the district that perhaps just needs to be better codified to the board. No, I am confused. You say it's clear, but I'm not clear about what the board is asking for.
Yeah, the question I'm hearing is programmatically, where are we giving time to this, and more than just simply I've received it, I've seen it on a wall, but programmatically, where are we actually discussing it?
So that's the information request that we are asking you to come back with.
I hear sensitivity to, we're not going to tell you specifically how to do it, we just want to know programmatically there's an interaction beyond the paper around this for at least some amount of time each year. Every employee And we're at this point just talked on the certified side of the house. We'll have to think about the other, because that to me is equally important. You know, all our staff, all 1,200 of them have to, anyone who's, you know, and that's where we've been. So I think we can get there, we can programmatically have it fit without it being a burden. I think we can do it. And I know the commitments of the staff in this room who are here late at night, and we can do it. I just,
Mr. Bernstein, excuse me, wait, I'm sorry, what did you say? Yeah, you want a motion to put it in part of the procedures?
I just was agreeing with Bill and saying, so many words that they come up with
Should be part of procedures.
otherwise,
It's just a,
it should go along with what
it's already developed.
So I'm hearing two different things, I'm sorry. I'm hearing,
I'm trying to help you out. What if we take what we've heard here, add in that programmatic piece as we think is reasonable, and then the procedure will be circulated for discussion and review, and if there need to be comment back on that, since that's the
That's
process.
clear. Thank
Is
you.
that? I just woke up.
Mr. Bernstein,
I would like to make a motion to approve the written report on the administrator.
is there a second? Ms. Applebaum, all those in favor? We're voting on accepting the administrator report, E060. 80. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Made by Mr. Bernstein, seconded by Ms. Staton. All those in favor? 8-0.
Sitting him.
Thank you, Ms. Connor. Appreciate your staying with us. Ms. Eves, agenda planning.
only once a year you have to do it.
Get on the road.
Agenda planning.
Hello. Here's what I have. That I'm going to be adding to the agenda plan the two items that were added to the meeting for tonight, Hamilton Avenue and the superintendent's evaluation. I'm going to be adding on March 10th a pilot notification on library zoning comments for discussion. But as a written report, sorry, not as discussion. On April 7th, I have that we are adding a school start time update at that work session. On May 12th, just notifying you we're changing location for the May 12th meeting to North Street School. Understanding the agenda may generate some interest, recommendations on school start time. And I have that we are adding a recommendation or a letter or discussion on SEL curriculum to a future meeting date to be determined, but soon. And at some point, I'm not sure exactly if it's coming back to a board meeting or not, the discussion we just had on the procedure. Does that come back to a board meeting? No, take that off the list.
I understand it's going to be codified in the memo and circulated. But
Yeah, well, the approach we've used on procedures is it's written, then PGC looks at it, there's no discussion, then I kick it so everybody sees it, the board, and they have a comment period. Since it's procedure.
So no, it does not have to come back.
It would only come back here from that two-step. There needs to be the third step, which I think we can avoid.
All right, excellent. With that, Mr. Bernstein, can you make a motion to adjourn the meeting to the Media Center for the purposes of going into executive session?
I would be more than happy to.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye, 8-0.
Is the center even open?